إعلان مهم.
重要提示
Important announcement.
Message important.
Важное объявление.
Anuncio importante.
يرجى من المتحدثين الكرام إلقاء بياناتهم بسرعة معقولة لضمان ترجمة فورية وافية وعالية الجودة.
为了帮助口译准确完整传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace to ensure complete and quality interpretation.
Il est rappelé aux orateurs qu'ils doivent présenter leur déclaration à un rythme raisonnable afin de garantir une interprétation complète et de qualité.
Напоминаем ораторам, что для того, чтобы устный перевод был полным и качественным, необходимо выступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y de calidad.
Excellences, distingués collègues, je déclare ouvert.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, I call to order the 18th meeting of the 60th session of the Human Rights Council. I would like to inform you that thanks to the availability of interpreters and technicians, it is possible for us to go until 13:15 today, which is important to catch up with the backlog we have in our program. So that said, now we're going to go with the general debate on item 3 of the agenda. Speaking time is 1 minute, 10 seconds for all. We're now going to consider list of members of the council. Distinguished representative of Sudan has the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, President.
اتباع مقاربة شاملة ومتكاملة لحقوق
We would like to reaffirm the importance of having an all-embracing approach as regards human rights, taking into account the interdependence of economic, social, and cultural rights on the one hand, and civil and political rights on the other. Peace is important to materialize human rights. Sudan has gone through exceptional circumstances due to conflict with militias, which is why we have adopted an approach to channel assistance while opening the borders to neighboring countries. We have also facilitated the work of humanitarian actors in order to provide assistance to those who need it. There are needs of development aid, though. We need more assistance. This has affected our ability to meet the needs of the population. Militias prevent humanitarian workers from doing their work. There are even aggressive acts against humanitarian workers. The militias create conditions for famine, and there's aggression in Darfur. This runs counter to UN resolutions. The promotion of human rights calls for addressing the root causes of conflict and to materialize the right to development for all. Thank you for your attention.
La Colombie.
Colombia is recognized. Economic, social, and cultural rights are fundamental components for human dignity, peace, development, and democracy. This has been pointed out since our peace agreement in 2016 and the report of the Truth Commission that came out of that agreement, which is why the government of Colombia has prioritized making progress on equality, dignified work, social security, formalizing the labor sector, national care system, access to land, food sovereignty, housing, potable water, health, education, and culture, among other basic rights. Also, the Special Courts for Peace, created as well by the 2016 agreement, 3 days ago, handed down their first ruling, which declared the 7 members of the former FARC Secretariat as those responsible for kidnapping and other serious crimes. Among the punishment, they must participate in economic and environmental restoration, recovering native species, and producing food crops. The ruling has 130 different orders. Many of them address the state agencies so that they act in favor of victims and guarantee that the sentence is seen through. This ruling is fundamental in our country, and it is a global example that through restorative criminal justice, we can help attain economic, social, and cultural rights. Thank you. Thank you. Gambia has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Gambia reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the promotion and protection of all human rights on the basis of universality, indivisibility, and interdependence. The urgent issues before us, from the devastating impacts of climate change to the marginalization of peasants and rural communities to the protection of the rights of older persons, demand sustained and inclusive action in order to ensure sustainable development and peace. We recognize the essential role of special procedures in advancing the promotion and protection of human rights. They represent the eyes and ears of this council on the ground, and so their independence and integrity are indispensable to our work. In that regard, the Gambia is deeply concerned by any measures that undermine both their impartiality and efficiency. Mr. President, despite significant progress at the normative level in establishing the rights of victims to reparations, we believe the Council's accountability work should place far greater emphasis on realizing the rights of victims to remedy, redress, and reparation. Restorative justice, such as truth-telling, memorialization, community-based reconciliation efforts, and reparations financing should be more centrally integrated into the mandate and work of this Council and its mechanism. We thank you, Mr. President.
Merci, je donne la parole au
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Bolivia has the floor. Thank you, Mr. President. At the anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women, devoted in particular to implementing the Declaration and Plan of Action of Beijing, it is timely to consider the progress made and the pending challenges as we try to attain gender equality and the empowerment of women across the world. Among the challenges, we have the necessary directioning of our actions to have more attention for Indigenous and peasant women in rural areas. As elements of earth biodiversity, holders of ancestral knowledge, and live culture, and they face the greatest inequalities. They bear the heaviest burden of unremunerated work and have the greatest rates of poverty and exclusion. The legacy of Beijing calls us to redouble our efforts in order to ensure their rights. Among many other pending urgent tasks, we must promote equal access of rural women to land, to water, to technology, and to productive resources. Empowering women can only be done by recognizing and strengthening the leadership of Indigenous and peasant women in decision-making positions, locally and nationally, including improving their participation within the United Nations system. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development will not be attained without the full participation of women. Thank you. Thank you. Distinguished representative of Cuba has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. President. The inhumane criminal economic embargo imposed by the United States against Cuba is a mass, flagrant, and systematic violation of the human rights of the entire Cuban population. The embargo violates the right to life, to food, to health, to living poverty-free, discrimination-free, and it violates Cuba's right to development. Many communications had been sent through special procedures to this council urging the government of the United States to put an end to these serious violations of human rights against the Cuban people. Yet, the government of the United States continues to disregard these appeals. On October 28th and 29th, the UNGA will be considering draft resolution the need to put an end to the economic, trade, and financial embargo of the United States against Cuba. We urge all states to vote in favor of that resolution. Israel's genocide against the Palestinian people, in which the U.S. is an accomplice, must come to an end. The Council must act against those responsible and the accomplices of this atrocity. We reiterate our solidarity with the government and the people of Venezuela, given the escalation of actions of the United States government justifying a military aggression against the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Cuba calls upon the international community to put an end to the aggression and to preserve Latin America and the Caribbean as a zone of peace. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Romania has the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Roumanie s'associe.
Thank you. We would like to endorse this statement made by the EU. We would also like to thank the Secretary General, the High Commissioner, and their office for the report they presented.
30 years after the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, Romania continues to advocate gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. Promoting equal opportunities, closing the gender pay gap, combating stereotypes, and eliminating all forms of violence and abuse remain central to our national and international priorities, also reflected in our role within the Commission on the Status of Women. Romania reaffirmed its strong commitment to the protection and promotion of all human rights. The realization of the right to development should be pursued in a manner fully consistent with the universality, indivisibility, interdependence, and individuality of all human rights. On the question of the death penalty, Romania reiterates its principled position in all cases and under all circumstances. We recall its incompatibility with human rights and dignity, support the call for a universal moratorium with a view to its abolition. We also welcome the Council's attention to the social reintegration of persons deprived of liberty. Effective reintegration is essential to protecting rights, preventing recidivism, and building inclusive societies. Finally, we have to invest more to promote human rights education and its integration within policies and strategies related to youth, sustainable development, non-discrimination, and social inclusion. I thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole à la liste.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of Switzerland has the floor. Thank you, Mr. President. Switzerland would like to thank the High Commissioner of the United Nations for his report on respecting human rights in the context of migration. Switzerland shares the vision of migration governance based on human rights, transparency, and shared responsibility between state, independent institutions, and civil society. In line with the recommendation of the report, Switzerland has domestic mechanisms to independently carry out monitoring from the human rights perspective of various aspects of migration and asylum governance. These aspects are also systematically addressed within our national reports to treaty bodies in the UN. Given that migration are transnational phenomena, we would like to highlight the importance of international cooperation to ensure the respect of rights of migrants and refugees. Lastly, Switzerland would like to thank the Secretary General for the most recent report on death sentence and shares the concern given the increasing number of documented executions led by a smaller and smaller group of countries. Switzerland would like to recall that the death penalty is not compatible with the full respect of fundamental rights, and that there is no conclusive proof indicating that using the death penalty would deter crime better than any other. Thank you.
Mr. President, Indonesia reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the indivisibility and interdependence of all human rights. Civil and political rights, along with economic, social, and cultural rights, are complementary and mutually reinforcing. This principle must also guide the Council's work in rationalizing its initiatives, as well as the works of the OHCHR, ensuring that programs related to economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development, are not disproportionately affected. We further believe that the current UN 80 initiative must not be disconnected from the global efforts to equally achieve the SDGs and to promote and protect economic and social and cultural rights, including the right to development. Mr. President, we're also deeply concerned about the rights of the Palestinian people to access food, education, healthcare, including access to vaccines, medicines, and other essential health products are not being fulfilled. Israel's prolonged occupation and military aggression further disconnects the Palestinian people from the fulfillment of their fundamental rights, including the economic, social, and cultural rights. We should put an end to this so that they can fully realize their rights. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Uganda has the floor on behalf of NAM.
Thank you, President.
The NAM reiterates the importance of the promotion and protection of all universally recognized human rights and fundamental freedoms in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. The movement reaffirms that all human rights, including the right to development, are universal, inalienable, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated. And we therefore call upon the Human Rights Council to provide equal treatment to civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as the right to development. The movement emphasizes the urgent need to make the right to development a reality for everyone, and we call upon the OHCHR to prioritize the promotion and protection of the right to development for all our people. And in the same spirit, the NAM attaches utmost importance to the work and the role of the Special Rapporteur on the right to development. And we therefore urge the Council to support the resolution that will be adopted or considered during this session to extend the mandate of the Special Rapporteur. Finally, we call upon all states and the UN human rights mechanisms to ensure that human rights are not used for political purposes and as a pretext for interference in internal affairs, but rather promotion of human rights for all. The statement is being delivered on behalf of the NAM, and we thank you for considering us at the end. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole à la distinguée.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Algeria has the floor.
Reaffirms its unwavering commitment to multilateralism and continues to engage constructively with all international and regional human rights mechanisms. In line with the recommendations of the Special Rapporteur following their visit to Algeria, important legal reforms have been undertaken, including amendment to the Penal Code to strengthen the rule of law and protect fundamental rights, the establishment of the National Observatory for the Prevention of Discrimination and Hate Speech reflects our determination to combat incitement and foster a culture of democracy and tolerance. Further, the National Health Security Strategy 2530 has been adopted to build a resilient and proactive healthcare system. In promoting women's rights, maternity leave was extended to 5 months with full pay, underscoring Algeria's commitment to gender equality and family welfare. Mr. President, no civil, political, social, or economic right can truly be realized when the fundamental right to self-determination is denied. Today, we affirm our steadfast support for all people struggling for this inalienable right. From Western Sahara to Palestine, my country's principled position to uphold the international law remains resolute. No geopolitical interest nor external pressure should compromise international law. We strongly condemn the continued atrocities and unfolding genocide in the occupied Palestinian territory. The culture of impunity must end. Accountability for grave violations, including war crimes and crimes against humanity, is essential to uphold international law and restore justice. Thank you.
Merci, ceci était la dernière intervention.
Thank you. That was the last speaker on the list. Now we're going to the list of observers in the Council. Distinguished representative of Ukraine speaking on behalf of a group of countries is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Lublin Triangle countries, Lithuania, Poland, and my own country, Ukraine. We thank officers' comprehensive reports. Despite global efforts, Ukrainian children continue to face unimaginable horrors caused by Russia's war. Recently, strikes on peaceful cities have brought devastating losses. Only in Kyiv, on 1st August, a massive attack killed 5 children, the youngest just 2 years old. On 28th August, a strike took the lives of 4 more and left over 10 injured. On 7th September, a mother and her 3-month-old or young son were among the victims. Russia's systematic attacks on residential areas, schools, and playgrounds constitute grave violation of international humanitarian and human rights law. Ukrainian children are not merely victims of war, they are being deliberately targeted, abducted, indoctrinated, and deprived of family, education, and safety. We welcome the decision to keep the Russian armed forces and affiliated groups of the Secretary General's list of grave violators, and on behalf of the victims, call for accountability of the aggressor for the crimes committed and for justice to be served. We therefore invite all states to join the International Coalition for Return of Ukrainian Children. Together, we can ensure their safe repatriation, rehabilitation, and justice. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Lithuania.
Thank you, Mr. President. Lithuania aligns itself with the EU and Lublin Triangle statements. War and violence increasingly affect children, undermining our collective efforts to promote peace and stability. Every day, children are being deprived of their homes, families, school, and safety in Gaza, Myanmar, Sudan, and many other places. Girls in Afghanistan are denied their basic rights, from education to adequate health care. In the context of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, thousands of children have been killed or deported to Russia or its accomplice Belarus, indoctrinated and militarized by the aggressor. Mr. President, last year was one of the worst years on record for children in armed conflicts. A 25% surge in grave violations against children, along with a 35% increase in cases of sexual violence. Globally, overlapping humanitarian crises and poverty exacerbate existing challenges, while also increasingly harming children's mental health. The global suicide rate is staggering, while still many cases go unreported due to stigma and inadequate reporting mechanisms. The safety, well-being, and the promotion and protection of the rights of the child should be our common priority. Therefore, we urge to end violence and discriminatory practices against children, return deported children, and provide all necessary support for their recovery and reintegration. I thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Uruguay has the floor. Thank you, Mr. President. Uruguay would like to thank the High Commissioner for the report, which attests to serious violations of human rights of children in armed conflict, which have reached record levels in terms of sheer magnitude and brutality. Uruguay upholds a strong commitment with this agenda, which means that we have ratified the Convention on the Rights of the Child and its optional protocol, as well as acceded to the Paris commitment to the Declaration on Safe Schools and the Vancouver Principles. Uruguay systematically supports the work of the Special Representative of the Secretary General and actively participates in the Group of Friends on Children in Armed Conflicts in New York and Geneva, where we co-chair along with Belgium. Also, we have developed, in collaboration with UNICEF, special guides for Uruguayan contingents in peacekeeping operations. In line with this unwavering commitment, Uruguay will take on a key role in negotiating the two-year resolution on the rights of the child in 2026, devoted to boys, girls, and armed conflict. This resolution represents an opportunity to push for comprehensive rehabilitation and reintegration programs that are gender-sensitive and age-aware, to improve accountability, and provide reparations that are victim-focused. We reiterate our commitment to work with renewed political will and stronger cooperation with the entire UN system to ensure that violations against boys and girls in armed conflict, they are unacceptable, and they call for specific actions from the international community, as well as accountability for those responsible for these violations. Thank you. Thank you, distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Mr. President, the Islamic Republic of Iran aligns itself with the statements of the groups it belongs to. My delegation wishes to underline that the enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedom, including the right to development, cannot be realized in isolation from broader global conditions. Prolonged conflicts, foreign occupation, widespread insecurity, and the imposition of unilateral coercive measures gravely undermine this right and erode the dignity of millions of people around the world. Unilateral sanction, in particular, continues to deny nations access to medicine, food, technology, and economical opportunities, disproportionately harming the most vulnerable groups, including women, children, and persons with disability. Such measures are incompatible with international law and the principles of the United Nations Charter. Equally alarming is the ongoing situation in Gaza, where deliberate attacks against civilians, the destruction of critical infrastructure, and the denial of humanitarian access amount to collective punishment and constitute a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law and human rights law. Mr. President, peace, stability, and international cooperation remains indispensable for the full realization of all human rights, and the Human Rights Council must continue to address the root causes of deprivation, resist the normalization of coercive and discriminatory policies, and reaffirm the universality of the right to development. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à la liste.
Thank you. The distinguished representative of the UAE has the floor.
Mr. President, the UAE reaffirms its firm upholding of human rights. This reflects a long path that we have taken in the national context, as well as very important initiatives that we have taken in the social economic cultural fields, especially vulnerable groups such as women and the elderly, with the aim of protecting human rights for all. For us, the family for us is a priority. It is the core of any society. From this premise, we work on protecting the family in all our policies and national programs. Mr. President, we strongly believe in the important role of this distinguished council, and we have presented our candidacy to the membership, and we look forward to working with all states in order to protect and preserve human rights around the world. We will continue working to achieve this noble goal and providing support to the Council, especially in the context of multilateralism and solidarity, in full respect of human dignity. Thank you.
Thank you, distinguished representative of the Russian Federation.
Господин
Mr. President, we have to once again draw attention to the unprecedented disinformation campaign against Russia unleashed by the states of the Western Alliance and their satellites aimed at discrediting Russia, revising its historical role and canceling culture. In many of these countries, Russophobic sentiments and anti-Russian hysteria, encouraged by the authorities, have de facto become the norm of life. Our compatriots living abroad, people who speak their native Russian language, as well as those who show sympathy for them, are subjected to oppression, desecration, and demolition of monuments to representatives of Russian culture and other manifestations of modern barbarism have become commonplace in these countries. The entire information space of the Baltic states, Poland, Romania, and the Czechia is saturated with hatred for everything related to Russia. In pursuit of momentary political dividends, the governments of these and a number of other states, in their Russophobic rhetoric, are ready to give up the principles of freedom of speech and thought that were once sacred to the Western worldview. The systemic practice of restricting and banning the activities of the Russian media clearly testifies to the use of selective approaches and double standards. This is a clear violation of the provisions of the fundamental UN documents in the field of human rights. We call upon the High Commission to finally give an impartial and objective assessment of these outrageous facts. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué représentatif.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Nepal is recognized.
Mr. President, Nepal takes note of the reports presented by the Secretary General, the High Commissioner, and the respective mandate holders under this agenda item. Nepal is a plural society which embraces cultural, linguistic, religious, and ethnic diversity. There is a strong sense of civil liberty, cultural cohesion, religious tolerance, and social harmony. The Constitution of Nepal guarantees 31 fundamental rights covering civil, political, economic, social, and cultural dimension, among others. We reaffirm our unwavering commitment to the promotion and protection of all human rights, including the right to development. Mr. President, human rights face complex and unprecedented challenges
Absolutely critical that gender equality and human rights remain at the center of the HIV response if we are to end AIDS as a public health threat, achieve the SDGs, and leave no one behind. The continued attention of the Council and OHCHR is essential in ensuring the response remains rights-based, gender-responsive, and community-led as it transforms into a more sustainable country-owned approach. A fully funded OHCHR would enable reports such as the one on HIV to be developed, providing important recommendations to support a rights-based HIV response at the global and national level. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au vice.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Egypt.
سيد الرئيس إن جميع حقوق الإنسان عالمية.
Thank you very much, President. All human rights are universal, indivisible, interdependent. It is necessary for the international community to look at these rights in a comprehensive and global manner in the same way for all. We have to move away for a policy of double standards and the selective application of international law and human rights. We are discussing agenda item 3, and this is why we condemn strongly the genocide carried out by Israel against civilians in Gaza. We condemn the violations of all the rights of Palestinian people, leading to famine. It is now impossible to live in Gaza, and their plans to chase the population out of those territories. We are working actively here in this council, and we are preparing to become a member of the council in order to promote human rights on an equal footing at a national level. We're applying our national human rights strategy, and we are ready to cooperate with the Office of the High Commissioner and other international partners on the basis of constructive cooperation. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bahrain.
Mr. President, at the outset, we'd like to associate ourselves with the statements delivered by the groups we belong to. We welcome the dialogue under item 3 with regards to economic, social, and cultural rights, including the right to development. The Kingdom of Bahrain reaffirms that the National Plan for Human Rights is a comprehensive framework for all these rights and are based on 4 pillars, including civil, political rights, as well as economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as rights for solidarity. We have established a human rights national institution in order to disseminate the culture of human rights. On the legislative level, we continue to make our legislation in conformity with our international obligations with the aim of preserving our rights. In conclusion, we reaffirm our commitment to positively interact with the UN mechanisms in the field of human rights in a manner that would improve cooperation and justice at the international level. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nigeria aligns with the OIC and NAM and reaffirms its commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms, including the right to development. As human rights crises and conflicts persist around the world, they leave devastating humanitarian consequences in their wake. Millions are displaced, vulnerable populations are deprived of essential services, and fundamental freedoms are increasingly under threat. These trends remind us that the protection of human rights remains an urgent global imperative. Mr. President, while no country, including Nigeria, is immune to human rights challenges, our government remains steadfast in its commitment to uphold human rights. We have undertaken comprehensive initiatives to expand access to education and healthcare, promote the rights of women and children, protect persons with disabilities, and ensure the inclusion and dignity of older persons. Nigeria continues to pursue holistic policies and inclusive governance, and we value close collaboration with regional and international partners. We call on the global community to strengthen solidarity, provide technical assistance and humanitarian support, and work collectively to mitigate human suffering and advance the universality, indivisibility, and protection of human rights for all, while fully respecting the territorial integrity and sovereign rights of states. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of India.
Mr. President, the world today faces multiple overlapping crises. From conflict and economic disruptions to climate change and food and energy shortages that are derailing progress towards the SDGs. These challenges disproportionately affect countries of the Global South and underscore the need for the Council to address all human rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural, including the right to development, in a balanced and holistic manner. India reaffirms that all human rights are universal, indivisible, interrelated, and interdependent. The work of this Council must be guided by principles of universality, impartiality, objectivity, and non-selectivity, while avoiding double standards and politicization. Constructive dialogue and cooperation, not finger-pointing, remain the most effective way to advance human rights. Country-specific measures, if undertaken, must enjoy the consent and support of the country concerned, with the objective of tangible improvement on the ground. It is only through such equitable and fair cooperation that the international community can make progress in realizing the SDGs and the full enjoyment of all human rights by all people. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Thank you, President. I am accompanied by 3 migrants, victims of enforced displacement after spending time in a prison in Salvador, and they were declared to be foreign enemies. For years, Venezuela has been the subject of a policy of harassment by the United States that has escalated through the application of unilateral coercive measures, a campaign of to discredit our institutions, to justify a foreign intervention in Venezuela. It is becoming more and more threatening with the movement of naval and air forces of the United States and a nuclear submarine in the Caribbean. This is a flagrant violation of the UN Charter. This threatens seriously stability in the region and threatens the human rights of Venezuelan people and in the region. According to official sources in the United States, they're carrying out extraditions in the Caribbean, shelling small boats in the Caribbean, killing people. This is why we urge the entire UN system and this council to condemn this policy of force that threatens international peace and security, and demand that the government of the United States put an end to these hostile actions and fully respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the political independence of Venezuela. Thank you. Merci. Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Oman.
السيد الرئيس
اطلع وفد بلادي على التقارير القيمة لأصحاب الولايات.
Thank you, President. My country would like to praise mandate holders for their work and thank the High Commissioner for his efforts. And the Sultanate of Oman reaffirms its commitment to human rights that are indivisible and universal. They are essential to guarantee the respect of equality and dignity. On this basis, the Sultanate of Oman has adopted comprehensive and inclusive policies that are based on a comprehensive approach to human rights and guarantees rights to every citizen and all of those who reside, including access to health services. This is a sine qua non condition to enjoy other services and rights, and this is part of our strategy until 2040. The right to have access to medical services, an absolute right of all citizens without any discrimination. My country is committed to principles of equality in terms of access to health services, and this can only be realized through the protection of health institutions, those who work in those institutions without any exception or derogation. And this is part of our international commitments. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Serbia.
Thank you, Mr. President. We thank the Secretary General and the High Commissioner for their reports under item 3 and would like to highlight some of our key priorities. Serbia expresses its appreciation for the World Program for Human Rights Education under the auspices of the High Commissioner. Its guidance continues to serve as a vital reference in shaping national strategies that empower young generations with the values of dignity, equality, and mutual respect. We have taken steps to embed these values throughout our education system. Serbia reaffirms its commitment to the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration. Over the past decade, we have faced continued pressure from mixed migration flows. Yet, our response remains firmly rooted in respect for human rights, regardless of migrant status. Our efforts prioritize the protection of vulnerable groups, especially children and victims of gender-based violence. In 2024, we introduced a single permit for residence and work, alongside full digitalization of procedures, promoting fair recruitment and safeguarding decent work for all migrants. We launched initiatives to include marginalized youth and conducted targeted teacher training to support refugee students and prevent human rights risks. Trafficking risks. Serbia reaffirms its commitment to a human rights-based approach in education, immigration, governance, and beyond. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Afghanistan.
Mr. President, in Afghanistan today, the systematic assault on all human rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural, continues unchecked. Women and girls are erased from public life, children face hunger, journalists and defenders are silenced, and public execution spread fear. The repression is now extended to the digital sector. The recent decree restricting access to wireless and fiber optic internet is not only crippling communication and economic life, but also systematically cutting off education, information, and freedoms. Yet another attempt to isolate society and silence dissent. These violations persist because they are met with impunity. The absence of consequences only emboldens perpetrators, making them braver to continue and deepen their repression. Each day, without accountability, is an invitation for further abuses. Mr. President, the Human Rights Council must use every tool it has already, its monitoring, its reporting, and its political weight to resist impunity and to show the people of Afghanistan that their plight is neither forgotten nor ignored. Mr. President, the people of Afghanistan deserve to know that this council stands with them and that the violation of their rights will not be allowed to continue without consequences. I thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Jordan.
Jordan.
السيد الرئيس تؤكد المملكة الأردنية.
Thank you very much, President. Jordan reiterates that human rights are universal and are not indivisible. They belong to everyone in every part of the world. The reality today shows that these principles are applied today in a selective manner. Steps should be taken against violations in some countries, and we also do not know what is taking place in other countries. And this is all because of political interests. This policy of double standards undermines the human rights system and doesn't make it possible to achieve its noble objectives. The right to development is a fundamental right. We will be unable to achieve development and the protection of human rights as long as we continue to have occupation and poverty. The aggression against Palestinian people is continuing. Palestinian people are deprived of their rights and the right to life and dignity. This is a very serious situation. In other words, the value of some human lives is less important than of others, and this undermines the principle of equality. Protecting human rights should be a legal and moral obligation. And freedom should be a value and not just simply a symbol. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Uganda.
Thank you, President. We align with the statements of the African Group, NAM, and OIC. My delegation reiterates the universality and indivisibility of all human rights and we therefore call for a constructive and non-politicized approach in promotion and the protection of human rights. Mr. President, wars, instability, poverty, underdevelopment, marginalization, engender social and economic exclusion, and violation of human dignity and human rights, which cannot be divorced from the meaningful discussion relating to human rights in this council. We therefore emphasize the urgency to restore peace and peacefully resolve conflicts, but also the importance of the completion of the International Covenant on the Right to Development. And my government remains committed to work with all member states to achieve this. Finally, I reiterate my government's commitment to ensuring the enjoyment of all human rights through our established democratic structures, including the upcoming election that the High Commissioner seemed jittery about. And we reaffirm and confirm to this Council that Uganda shall follow our established national laws, including our international laws that we remain committed to protect for
Uganda and for all our people. I thank you.
Merci, Jonathan.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Senegal. President, Senegal aligns itself with the statement of the groups that we belong to and commends the efforts of OHCHR in pursuit of collective well-being, which requires universal respect for human rights. It is clear, however, that the full realization of these rights is currently threatened by a global context dominated by multi-sectoral crises that slow down the pace of implementation of SDGs and further expose the most fragile states. In this respect, my country believes that a more united international order coupled with a more just and equitable global economic system would make it possible to better address the challenges related to conflict prevention and management, climate change, debt relief, technology transfer, and good governance. These challenges also represent obstacles to the realization of the right to development. Senegal considers that to be a fundamental right essential for the full realization of all other rights. It is essential for achieving resilience, fairness, and dignity. We therefore call for resolute implementation of innovative solutions and partnerships such as the Pact for the Future to remove constraints that reduce developing countries' policies, such as the high cost of financing and country risk assessment methodologies. Finally, Senegal reaffirms its commitment to a multilateral system based on the pursuit of peace and shared prosperity through constructive dialogue and cooperation among nations. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Tunisia.
شكرا سيد الرئيس. تجدد تونس التزام.
Thank you very much, President. Tunisia would like to renew its long-standing commitment to human rights and cooperation of the mechanisms of this council in line with its constitution, national laws, and international commitments. We renew our commitment to the indivisible nature of human rights, including the right to development, and on the universal nature of rights. At the national level, we are working to ensure that the right to development is fully implemented, and this is integrated in our action plan 2023-2025 and the country vision 2020-2035. My country stresses the importance of adopting a legally binding international declaration related to the right to development, and we recall the need to promote financing for development assistance and support developing countries in a more equitable manner. It is necessary also to cooperate seriously to recover funds that have left countries, and we call upon the international community to intervene urgently to put an end to the genocide being carried out by the occupying force against the Palestinian people and in the occupied Palestinian territories, and the urgent need to put an end to this occupation and to put an end to impunity and bring those responsible for these acts to accountability and justice. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to South Center.
Thank you, Mr. President. The South Center welcomes the update of the technical guidance on preventable maternal mortality and will support its human rights-based approach. We also take note of the report of the Working Group on the Right to Development, as the right is central to achieving the right to health for all. We are encouraged that the guidance analyzes the root causes of maternal mortality. It correctly highlights an intersectional approach to discrimination and introduces a human rights economy framework. For too long, the devastating impacts of debt crisis, austerity, healthcare privatization, and unilateral coercive measures have crippled developing countries directly, undermining the right to development and obstructive access to essential health services. The guidance rightly broadens accountability to international financial institutions and calls for reforming the global financial architecture to prioritize human rights. We strongly support the call for independent accountability and reparation for victims, recognizing preventable maternal deaths as grave injustices that require systemic solutions. Mr. President, the roadmap is clear. The South Center calls all the states and international partners to move from commitment to full implementation of this justice-oriented guidance and the adoption of the Covenant on the Right to Development. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to UNFPA.
Chair, this statement is done on behalf of UNFPA and UN Women. We welcome OHHR's update to the technical guidance and report on maternal mortality and morbidity, which underscores that preventable maternal mortality and morbidity remains an urgent public health, human rights, and development concern. A human rights-based and gender-responsive approach is indispensable to address the socioeconomic, cultural, and political factors that put women and girls at risk, including deep-rooted gender inequalities, intersectional discrimination, and systemic failures. Maternal mortality and morbidity cannot be addressed in isolation. It is a cornerstone of sexual and reproductive health and rights, which encompass the full continuum of care, from comprehensive sexuality education to the prevention and response to gender-based violence, antenatal, childbirth, and postnatal care, as well as access to contraception, safe abortion where legal, prevention and treatment of HIV and other sexually transmitted infections, menstrual and menopausal health, and care for reproductive cancers. Maternal health outcomes are stronger when sexual and reproductive health and rights is an integral component of universal health coverage, ensuring women and girls have access to comprehensive care across the life course. Access to comprehensive sexuality education is key in improving maternal health outcomes. It contributes to preventing teenage pregnancy, a critical problem in a world where maternal mortality continues to be a leading cause of death for adolescent girls in many countries. Moreover, it helps prevent STIs, which, if untreated, can create risk of HIV and lead to pelvic inflammatory disease and cause preventable infertility. We stand ready to support member states.
I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nearly everything that sustains our lives is transported by ships operated by seafarers. Seafarers are key workers, yet for far too long they have been invisible, treated like the commodities they help transport. In July 2024, on the initiative of the Philippines, the Human Rights Council adopted Resolution 56/18, highlighting the full human rights dimension of the challenges seafarers face and calling for strengthened protection mechanisms. To answer this call, the Philippines launched the Manila Declaration on Seafarers' Human Rights, Safety, and Well-being at the conclusion of the international conference that took place in Manila on 1 to 3 September 2025. The Manila Declaration reaffirms a simple but often overlooked truth. Human rights do not end at shore. They are inalienable and inviolable on land and at sea. The Manila Declaration urges all stakeholders to translate this principle into practice through enhanced tripartite dialogue and collaboration for a more effective enforcement of human rights norms and standards. The Philippine government is grateful for the early endorsements of the Manila Declaration from key players in the global shipping industry. We invite other states to join this call for a more just and inclusive global shipping industry where the rights and dignity of all seafarers are protected and respected at all times. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Cambodia has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. At the heart of multilateralism stands an unshakable principle that places the precondition for the enjoyment of all human rights, and the rule of law must prevail over the rules of force. When peace is broken, the rights are not delayed; they are extinguished. Despite the truth, Thailand incursion persists, placing the ceasefires in grave peril. The recent military hostilities against Cambodia have revealed with a brutal clarity on how swiftly violence can unravel decades of progress. Lives have been lost, hundreds of thousands abroad, and homes, hospitals, schools, and places of worship reduced to ruins. Borders communities that once lived in dignity now endure displacement, expulsions, and fear. They are not statistics, but human strategies. Children denied classroom, sick, lost without care, families strip out shelters and securities. Our deeper concern is the assault on a cultural landmark, most clearly the temples of Devi, a UNESCO's World Heritage Site. They are not merely stone. They are the memories, identity, and soul of a nation. To wound them is to wound humanity itself, striking the very heart, the foundation of reconciliation and peace. This strategy reminds us that peace is more than the silent arm. It is a cornerstone of dignity, rights, and development. Cambodia therefore calls upon the Council to reaffirm the principle of non-discrimination, equal protection, and safeguard of the cultural heritage, and to strengthen cooperation with OHCHR. I thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole au
Thank you, distinguished representative of Cabo Verde. Thank you, Mr. President. The delegation of Cabo Verde would like to congratulate you for the way in which you have led this session and would like to thank everyone who has made this meeting possible. We would like to underscore 3 points. First, the impact of climate change on human rights, particularly the rising sea levels, are an existential threat for Cabo Verde. We are honored to actively contribute to the draft resolution on this subject as part of the core group. We reiterate the role of sport as a means to inclusion, respect, and development. The progress of our national football team qualifying for the World Cup 2026 is proof of the results of our investment in this sector. We sponsor the resolution against racism, which we believe is a priority struggle. Lastly, we would like to reiterate our strong commitment to human rights and our opposition to the death penalty. We are committed to human rights, dialogue, and multilateralism. Thank you.
UNODC.
Thank you, UNODC, via video.
Thank you for the opportunity to deliver a statement on behalf of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. As highlighted by the study of OHCHR, the social reintegration of persons in conflict with the law is a core pillar of effective, fair, and sustainable crime prevention and criminal justice. In UNODC, we support over 50 member states to put a stronger focus on fostering the rehabilitation and reintegration prospects of offenders, coupled with investments in the use of non-custodial measures and the institutional capacities of prison and probation systems. Let us be clear that the social reintegration of offenders requires a holistic approach, one that rests on broad governmental support, the contribution of civil society, buy-in from general public, and a firm alignment with UN standards and norms, such as the Nelson Mandela Rules. We are therefore pleased that the 35th session of the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice endorsed new UN model strategies on reducing reoffending this year, which provide detailed normative guidance on fostering social reintegration prospects with the involvement of a wide range of relevant stakeholders. UNODC remains committed to working with member states and partners to translate these strategies into meaningful, lasting change for the benefit of all of us. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, je donne.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize the distinguished representative of Malta.
Malta aligns itself with the statement delivered by the EU and thanks the Secretary General and High Commissioner for their reports under Item 3. Malta reiterates its principled and absolute opposition to the death penalty in all circumstances. We viewed capital punishment as a violation of human dignity and the right to life. We continue to call on all states to establish moratoria with a view to abolition. We remain strongly committed to advancing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. We underline the importance of full and equal participation of women in political, economic, and peace and security processes in line with the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. Finally, Malta highlights the importance of protecting the rights of LGBTIQ persons. We are proud of the progress achieved nationally, but remain deeply concerned about the discrimination and violence that persists globally. We encourage all states to adopt inclusive, legal, and policy frameworks that guarantee equal for all. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Pakistan is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since the last debate on this agenda during the 58th Council session, regional events have focused my delegation's attention on water as the basis of human existence and all human rights. In Pakistan, the enjoyment of human rights by 240 million people are contingent on the waters of the Indus River system. It has direct and immediate impacts on the enjoyment of the rights to food, health, environment, drinking water, sanitation, and development, to name only a few. With climate change-induced droughts and floods, the link between access to water and hydrological data and the realization of human rights has become even more acute. Since 1960, the Indus Waters Treaty has governed the sharing of rivers, with Pakistan retaining rights to the 3 western rivers while ceding 3 eastern ones. Treaty remains a binding legal instrument that has survived wars. Its success contributed to key international norms like no harm rule, the principle of equitable use and cooperation, and reflected in instruments like the UNHRC Water Convention. It is deeply regrettable to see the normative underpinnings of international law instrumentalized in the misguided pursuit of regional hegemony. Pakistan will never accept the weaponization of water against our people and their rights. I thank you, Mr. President.
Merci. Je donne la parole au distingué.
Thank you. Distinguished representative of Honduras is recognized. Thank you, Mr. President. The deep inequalities that we face worldwide limit the possibilities of millions of people to live with dignity. This is exacerbated by the environmental crisis that threatens sustainability and creates a disproportionate impact on the most vulnerable sectors. As pointed out by the report A6095, climate justice must guide our collective responses by promoting a fair transition that places people at the core of the policies and strengthens resilience given environmental challenges. This approach is not just a technical response, it's an ethical imperative to ensure that development is anchored on the dignity of people, which is why we underscore what was pointed out in report A60/40, which reminds that access to financing is indispensable to what is important, which is how resources are used in order to strategically invest in economic, social, and environmental sustainability, which is why we can no longer wait to continue to make progress towards a more fair, equal, and effective international financial institution that has inclusive, accessible, and predictable environmental financing institutions to underpin resilience and the sustainable development of all people. Honduras underscores the importance to have technological and financial commitments taken on by the countries with the greatest historical responsibilities be fulfilled fully and on time. We also reiterate our commitment to multilateralism and to a solidarity-based international cooperation, one that understands equity, equality, and mutual respect. Thank you. Thank you. That was the last statement on my list, and we move on now to national human rights institutions and non-governmental organizations. Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions has the floor.
On behalf of GANRI, thank you, Chair. We welcome the OHCR study on migration, which underscores the need for robust and comprehensive human rights monitoring across all aspects of migration and border governance. The report highlights how independent human rights monitoring not only helps identify and prevent human rights violations, but also strengthens states' ability to meet their international obligations and protect the rights of all people in the move, regardless of their migration status. We particularly commend the emphasis on the crucial role of UNHRCs and concrete examples in the report, which highlight their work and impact in close partnership with CSOs. As recommended in the report, we call on states to ensure that UNHRCs have guarantees of independence, operational, financial, and institutional to effectively monitor, report, and hold states accountable as required by the Paris Principles. This includes a broad mandate, adequate funding, and their safe and full access for monitoring of migration and border governance. The report's recommendations to strengthen internal state oversight mechanisms, ensure access to information, protect civil space, and foster cooperation between independent monitors and civil society provide a clear roadmap for improving transparency and accountability. We also support the call for enhanced regional and international cooperation and for states to integrate human rights monitoring into migration agreements, policies, and reporting frameworks, incorporating the recommendations of reports by stakeholders, including UNHRCs, and the proposal to establish an international independent monitoring mechanism to foster human rights compliance and accountability of international borders, ultimately by investing in an...
Je donne la parole au Centre européen.
Thank you. Europe Center, Tiarmont has the floor. Mr. President, we note with great concern the increase in inequalities throughout the world, which are among the many structural obstacles to the exercise of the right to development. That said, international cooperation in good faith and respect for international law based on the UN Charter and the rights of peoples to determine their own future remain key elements for the implementation of the right to development. However, nowadays, the US, the most powerful state in the world, not only does not respect international law and its international commitments, but more and more it uses threats and blackmail to defend particular interests to the detriment of the general interest. It is time for other states of the UN to take their collective responsibility to uphold international law, to defend a multilateral system embodied by the UN, and to organize the exit from the neoliberal development model in order to ensure, in particular, social cohesion and public services, which are necessary for the attainment of the right to development. We also call on states to adopt the draft covenant on the right to development, which would facilitate the effective implementation of this right. SETIM reiterates its support to the Intergovernmental Working Group on the Right to Development and reaffirms its unwavering commitment to this issue. We will continue our mobilization in consultation with other allied civil society organizations and social movements. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Abshar Athafa Charity Institute.
Mr. President, the negative impact of unlawful unilateral sanctions severely undermines fundamental human rights. The sanctions restrict access to essential medicines, medical equipment, and healthcare services, directly violating the right to health guaranteed under international human rights law. By impeding economic activities and disrupting social infrastructures, sanctions exacerbate poverty and obstruct sustainable development efforts, violating the right to development and the imperative to eradicate poverty worldwide. Furthermore, sanctions damage education systems by limiting resources, restricting exchange programs, and creating economic hardships that force children and youth to abandon schooling, thus violating the right to education. The interconnected nature of these rights shows that unilateral sanctions constitute a blockade against the full realization of human dignity and social progress. Their extraterritorial application disregards international legal norms and harms vulnerable populations, deepening inequalities and suffering. We commend Special Rapporteur Professor Alina Dohen for her 6 years of outstanding dedication to investigating and reporting on the human rights implications of UCMs. Her rigorous work has illuminated these critical issues on the global stage. It is our sincere hope that her successor continues this important mandate with equal commitment, advancing international efforts to uphold human rights and justice. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. RSKS has the floor.
President, on 30th July 2025, a funeral of a boy named Tahir at Konya village in Pakistan-occupied Jammu and Kashmir was interrupted. The cries and wails of the boy's mother were drowned by angry barbs being directed at a representative of Lashkar-e-Toiba, an internationally prescribed terror outfit which operates with impunity in Pakistan. Tahir had been brainwashed and recruited by LET to carry out terror attacks in India. On 22nd April 2025, he was part of the group of heavily armed terrorists which executed 26 Hindu tourists in cold blood at Pahalgam in India. For 26 families, a holiday turned to horror. Their mistake was their religion. Mr. President, these committees and special procedures, these buildings of stone are of no use if they cannot condemn such a heinous act and hold the sponsors of such attacks accountable for their crimes against humanity. Importantly, the United Nations Security Council officially identified the resistance force, a pseudonym for LET in the sanctions monitoring report, as responsible for the terror attacks in Kashmir. Poor, vulnerable and gullible youth across Pakistan are brainwashed and sent to carry out such crimes. The support structure to these terrorists is nurtured by state proxies. Mr. President, urgent, committed and sincere action is required to stop vulnerable youth from...
Thank you. Global Rights Defense has the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. GHRD would like to express its persistent concern over the human rights situation of ethnic and religious minorities in Bangladesh. We note a concerning amount of over 2,400 incidents of violence targeting minorities within the last year. Such attacks are carried out against indigenous peoples and ethnic minorities, especially in the Chittagong Hills, as well as against Hindu and Christian minorities across the country. The documented violence includes attacks on places of worship and homes, gender-based violence, mostly in the form of rape, arbitrary arrests and false blasphemy charges, land grabbing and forced displacement, the forced resignation of minority professionals, and the forced conversion of teenagers and young adults. While we take note of the cooperation of the Bangladeshi government with this council and the OHCHR, we urgently appeal to this council and its member states to make sure that such cooperation is enhanced and accountability for the human rights violations of minorities is ensured. Consequently, we call for the immediate release of unjustly detained minority leaders and activists, the retention or reform of laws used to target minorities, and independent investigations into all reported incidents of violence and discrimination. The protection of indigenous peoples and minorities in Bangladesh should be closely monitored by the international community, including a UN fact-finding mission. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. International Federation of Aging has the floor.
Alors, ça veut dire quoi? International Federation on Aging, you have the floor.
The International Federation on Aging makes this statement on behalf of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People and its over 400 members, bringing the voices of older persons from around the world. We applaud the Council's work to advance the rights of older persons. Its consensus solution to elaborate a legally binding instrument was a victory for human rights and multilateralism at the time of international uncertainty. We also applaud the Council's emphasis on civil society participation. We urge member states to include older persons, their representative organizations, and civil society representatives as equal participants alongside
History warns us that societies under strain can seek scapegoats. Simplifying complex social problems to a single cause deepens division and risks renewed violence against ethnic minorities. Multiculturalism, by contrast, has been a long-standing source of resilience and prosperity. Authorities, universities, and civil society must therefore use measured, responsible messaging, strengthen protection for migrant communities, and ensure access to justice and safety. We urge governments and institutions to adopt clear policies to monitor and counter racist rhetoric, safeguard international education pathways, and provide targeted support, including legal aid and housing solutions for those most vulnerable. We must oppose narratives that reinforce a binary worldview and instead defend inclusion, legal recognition, and dignity for all. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole au Friends World Committee for Consultation.
Thank you. In September 2015, the world paused as the lifeless body of Alan Kurdi, a Syrian child, washed ashore. He became a devastating symbol of all the people lost seeking dignity, safety at borders around the world. Since then, more than 70,000 are recorded to have died or gone missing in migration. These are not the full figures. And these are not just statistics, they are lives. The High Commissioner referred last week to the normalization of violation of the rights of migrants and refugees. Contributing to this avoidable loss of life. We welcome the report on the human rights monitoring in the context of migration, which highlight that robust independent monitoring is essential, not only to document violations, but to prevent them, to uphold dignity and to save lives. It can disrupt this normalization and dehumanization. The recommendations are clear. This council has a role to play in strengthening independent human rights monitoring at international borders, including responding to the calls from civil societies to establish an international independent monitoring mechanism. We urged the Council to act decisively. 10 years from now, let us not look back at one decade of preventable deaths. Let us look back knowing that this Council chose accountability and dignity and took actions to save lives. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I give the floor to women's non-governmental organizations in the Islamic Republic of Iran by video.
Masakala Iranian by Israel. Wars and conflicts have constantly been among the most tragic events in the history of humanity. To research children in the most vulnerable segment of society have suffered from the devastating consequences of war. Their fundamental rights, including the right to life and the right to health, have been safely threatened and violated the unadmissible claims of this facility. The right to the life of children is emphasized in the humanitarian legal instrument, most basic and fundamental natural right, international humanitarian law, particularly the Convention related to the rights of child and the laws of the conflict places special emphasis on the protection of children during the war and crisis, in addition to the general protection afforded to the children of civilian and their humanitarian activity. Children benefit from special protection during the vulnerability. Article 77 explicitly stated that children shall be the object of special display and shall be protected against any form of assault. These children are a clear reflection of the individual caught in the war, initiated by Israel, whose aggressive assault have constantly condemned them to victimize. In conclusion, we shall honor international organizations and UNICEF to hold Israel as its support content to the application under international humanitarian law and child protection treaties, safety and well-being of children in the region.
Merci. Je donne la parole.
I give the floor to the Elise Relief Foundation.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Fondation.
Thank you very much, President. The Elise Relief Foundation is seriously preoccupied with the exploitation of children in the Tindouf mines. The Algerian authorities, in cooperation with the Polisario Front, exploit children to carry out dangerous jobs. They continue to recruit children in Tindu camps. These children are separated from their families, removed from their homes, exposing them to risks of murder and mutilation. According to the information available to the foundation, more than 8,000 children have been recruited in the Tindouf camps with the connivance of Algerian authorities. Children participated in military parades, and minors of 12 years of age were military trained. Such acts represent a crime against humanity. Eliska recommends to the Algerian authorities to invite Polisario to cooperate with the Special Representative of the UN Secretary General on Children in Armed Conflict in order to put an end to violations committed against children of Tindouf. And finally, Eliska demands an end to the worst forms of child labor. Thank you.
Institute of Sustainable Development by video.
Mr. President, the Institute for Sustainable Development strongly condemns Israel's aggressive policies and its 12-day aggression against Iran, which killed more than 600 civilians, near 50 children, and destroyed a large number of homes. These actions constitute a grave violation of the UN Charter and international humanitarian law and pose a direct threat to international peace and security. The targeting of residential areas, civilian infrastructure, and essential services reflects a systematic policy of collective punishment that cannot be justified under any pretext. Such crimes devastate families, displace communities, and destabilize the region. Instead of pursuing dialogue, Israel has chosen escalation, fueling insecurity and prolonging a cycle of violence across the Middle East. For years, Israel has relied on aggression as a tool of policy. The latest attacks on Iran demonstrate this destructive approach at its peak, civilians bearing the greatest burden while long-term stability is undermined. The repercussion extends beyond Iran border, threatening regional peace and global security alike. We urge the United Nations to condemn these crimes, ensure accountability, and adopt urgent measures to protect civilians. Sustainable peace demands adherence to international law, respect for human dignity, and a decisive rejection of policies rooted in war and occupation. I thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to development of the local community association at Gazirat Biba.
Mr. President, the Sudan faces a very severe humanitarian crisis. It is very unfortunate. However, the interpreters cannot interpret with this sound quality and at this speed.
شهداء عيان وهما محامي سوداني من نيالا ومزارع من سنار بأنهما لاحظا انتشارا واسعا لاحمرار العينين وسيلان غزير للدموع لدى السكان مما استدعاهم لاستخدام النظارات السوداء دائما. وتم تسجيل حالات إجهاض متعددة بين النساء في نيالا بالإضافة إلى ولادة أطفال مشوهين ونفوخ في الأغنام وعوام الأرض بسنار بسبب التعرض للمواد الكيميائية. يعاني السكان بالمدينتين من أمراض الالتهابات الصدرية والكحة المزمنة والربو الشديد، حيث أكد الأطباء في المستشفيات المحلية بنيالا أن الفحوصات التي أجريت على ملابس المصابين بالاختناق أظهرت احتوائها لغاز الكلور الكيميائي المحرم دوليا. إن ما يحدث في نيالا وسنار هو جريمة حرب وجرائم ضد الإنسانية. عليه نطلب من مجلس حقوق الإنسان اتخاذ الإجراءات الفورية لفتح تحقيق شامل ودولي في هذه الانتهاكات الجسيمة بالمنطقتين، ونأمل في ضمان تقديم الدعم والحماية للمدنيين فيهما وفي كل مناطق النزاع الأخرى. وشكرا.
Merci, je donne la parole à Bundesgemeinschaft.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Bundesarbeitsgemeinschaft, the senior organization, for joint statement.
Excellencies, we align ourselves with the joint statement of GARA. As representative organization of older persons, we commend the Council for its efforts to advance the rights of older persons, particularly through the consensus adoption of Resolution 58/13, which establishes an intergovernmental working group. We eagerly anticipate a constructive and inclusive dialogue among member states, all the persons, their representative organizations, and other stakeholders. It is essential that this process upholds existing standards and effectively addresses the full spectrum of human rights violations faced by older persons worldwide. In line with the principle, nothing about us without us, which guided the drafting of CRPD, we urge to be included as equal participants in the drafting and negotiation of the forthcoming treaty. To ensure that the diverse voices of older persons are heard, we recommend the working group to adopt a hybrid format and accredit organizations that participated in the open-ended working group in New York. We urge states to redouble their efforts to guarantee a fully inclusive and participatory process so that this treaty may serve both future generations and those who have been instrumental in building the international human rights framework we cherish today. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Society for Threatened Peoples.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Ding Lebin. My father, Mr. Ding Yuande, remains arbitrarily detained in China solely for his faith in Falun Gong. My parents in China will face reprisals because of my statement today. Since July 20, 1999, Chinese authorities have carried out severe human rights violations in an attempt to eradicate the peaceful spiritual practice Falun Gong. As of August 31, 2025, more than 5,200 deaths have been documented by credible NGOs. The escalation started in October 2022 when the People's Republic of China began a new effort to export this persecution abroad. Tactics include disinformation campaigns, death and bomb threats, misuse of foreign legal systems, and other forms of transnational repression. On August 13, 2025, the former Hong Kong chief executive Liang Zhenying threatened Finnish Falun Gong meditators in a park in Helsinki, acting as though Chinese persecution policy applies abroad in direct violation in Finland's religious freedom. 2 days later in Malaysia, a Chinese group claiming links to a China police station unlawfully removed materials from a female Falun Gong practitioner who was meditating. We urge the Council and Member States to recognize and condemn these incidents as transnational repression by the PRC, to investigate them properly and effectively, to uphold the principle of non-refoulement, and to call on China to release all detained Falun Gong practitioners, including my father, Mr. Ding Yuande. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to Partners for Transparency.
Thank you, Mr. President. The African continent loses over $580 billion annually due to corruption and illicit financial flows, a figure that exceeds its capacity to finance infrastructure and development, deepening its debt burdens, which approach $2 trillion. Corruption is directly linked to human rights violations in African countries. In Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces have been involved in seizing gold mines and smuggling gold through corrupt networks, depriving the state of essential revenues needed to fund public services. In Ethiopia, corrupt practices have affected water resource management and infrastructure projects, negatively impacting the right to water in equitable development for neighboring countries. In South Sudan, oil revenues managed in a predominantly corrupt environment have fueled armed conflicts instead of supporting development, exacerbating humanitarian crises. In conclusion, Mr. President, partners recommend that the prioritize anti-corruption efforts within the mechanism for protecting and promoting human rights and sustainable development, ensuring the recovery of looted
resources and directing them to serve the right of African people in justice and development. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Defense for Children International.
Mr. President, we welcome the High Commissioner's report on violations of the human rights of children in armed conflict and the child-friendly version of the report. Children continue to bear the heaviest burden of war through recruitment and use of child soldiers, arbitrary detention, sexual violence, abductions, attacks on schools and hospitals, and the denial of humanitarian access. To prevent such violations, it is essential to strengthen early warning systems and enhance child protection frameworks, ensuring that child rights are mainstreamed across all international mechanisms addressing armed conflict. We call for stronger accountability measures, both at national and international levels, including enhancing monitoring and reporting mechanisms to ensure the systematic documentation of grave violations. Deepening cooperation with judicial bodies, both domestic and international, is vital to ensure timely and effective justice. Global commitment to accountability and use of sanctions against perpetrators must be reinforced to send a clear message. Violations against children will not go unpunished. We call upon all member states to adopt and implement standard operating procedures for the immediate and direct handover of children from military custody to appropriate child protection agencies, to recognize that children who are detained for actual or perceived association with armed groups are first and foremost victims of grave abuses, to encourage the Committee on the Rights of the Child to consider developing a general comment on the right.
Mr. President, for Syed Adil Hussain Shah, a hardworking pony operator in Pahalgam, India, 22nd April 2025 was a day of opportunity, a day when he could work hard and earn a legitimate decent wage for his family, something which must be inalienable right of every human on this earth. People in this room have worked to protect this right. Sadly, that very right and his life was taken away on 22nd April by terrorists trained, brainwashed and instructed by a state which uses violence as a state policy and terror. Mr. President, while one Kashmir progresses and moves forward, irrespective of the religious terror unleashed by state-sponsored terrorists, there is another which is forced by Pakistan to partake in its program of violence and radicalization. The Pahalgam attack represents a direct assault on the right to life, the freedom of movement, the right to travel safely, and the freedom to practice religion, all guaranteed under international human rights law. We strongly urge the international community to act decisively. The flow of financial resources to terror organizations must be stopped, and the legitimate right of the people to develop, grow, and improve their socio-economic conditions. Let us stand together in solidarity with the victims of the terror attack on Pahalgam. I call upon you to urge Pakistan to grant international NGOs and United Nations immediate and unfettered access to Pakistan-occupied Kashmir so that the basic human rights of life, development, and growth, and socio-economic prosperity of this people can be protected and legitimate opportunities can be created for a society in peril. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I give the floor to Hong Kong Federation of Women.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dedicated to the advancement of women and children since our inception in 1993, Hong Kong Federation of Women welcomes the proactive measures outlined this week in the policy address of the Chief Executive of the HKSAR China. The commitment to enhance funding for women's development, the implementation of robust child protection laws, and the dedicated support to the elderly, disabled, and ethnic minorities. These are significant steps towards a more inclusive and equitable society. These positive developments are made with the stability and safety provided by the One Country, Two Systems and the national security laws, which ensure a high quality of life and liberties for both residents and international friends. Under this framework, Hong Kong has thrived in many areas, recently recognized as a leading global innovation hub. a pioneer in digital competitiveness, and one of the world's top talent destinations. Furthermore, building on our common law heritage and international character, Hong Kong established the International Organization for Mediation this year. These achievements directly contradict any allegations of systemic erosion of human rights. At a time of shared global challenges, from climate change to conflict, unity and cooperation are more crucial than ever. We urge everyone to focus on strengthening international and domestic efforts on promoting and protecting economic, social, and cultural rights. We eagerly look forward to strengthening global solidarity on gender equality and women's empowerment with everyone at Beijing Plus 30 next month. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Women's Human Rights International Association.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. President, the International Women's Human Rights Association calls for an immediate intervention of the rapporteur group of the United Nations to prevent the implementation of the plans of Iranian authorities to destroy Section 41 of the Behesht Zahra Cemetery in Tehran. The section is the burial place of approximately 9,500 political prisoners. Most of them were members of the People's Mojahedin Organization of Iran who were executed in the 1980s. According to the deputy mayor of Tehran, the cemetery area will be transformed into a parking lot with the authorization of the highest levels of power. The cemetery director publicly admitted, "We raised this place." This act shows the Iranian government's deliberate desire to erase evidence of mass executions recognized by UN experts as crimes against humanity and genocide, and to prevent any accountability. The preservation of these places remains essential for truth, memory, and justice. Thank you, President.
Merci, je donne la parole.
I give the floor to the Zambali Trust.
Thank you, Mr. President. On April 22nd, 2025, the morning calm of a beautiful valley in Pahalgam was shattered by the sound of guns and the cries of innocent civilians. As terrorists trained and brainwashed by state actors mercilessly massacred 26 people, identify victims on the basis of their religion. Mr. President, there can be no greater fundamental human right than the right to live, and that very right was taken away in the most gruesome manner by proxies of a state habituated to such violence. Mr. President, the events at Pahalgam were only the latest of a series of such attacks designed to spread hatred and fear carried out at the behest of so-called state establishments. The world faces acute human rights crisis where violence against civilians propagated by terrorism, state-sponsored aggression undermines peace, stability, and the very principles of human dignity enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Only through collective justice, inclusion, and adherence to the rule of law can these challenges to overcome. Global solidarity in response has been vital. The United Nations Security Council condemned the attack unequivocally and called for accountability of perpetrators and sponsors. Mr. President, enough is enough, and we must not distinguish between attackers and sponsors anymore. Mr. President, Samhari Trust supports these efforts and stresses the importance of supporting grassroots peace builders, strengthening international legal frameworks, and ensuring accountability for all violations of human rights. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole à Mansour.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Mansour Iparsek.
Citizen Civil Rights Protection, Mansour Iparsek. Mr. President, development for all, the foundation of for sustainable peace. Sustainable peace is more than just in overcoming temporary conflicts and extension short-term disputes. Development is the foundation and encompass security, justice, and prosperity for all people simulation. The slogan development for all can be seen as a roadmap the truth. In this roadmap, every individual, regardless of nationality, gender, religion, or economic, has the right to walk and the path growth of tranquility. Along this path, investment in education and civic engagement, strengthening a culture of constructive dialogue and clarifying communication and cooperation between government with the aim and addressing and dialogue free from unilateralism at local, national, and international level are great importance and can play science-field role leading to lasting cooperation. Let us, with low slogan development for all, tangible steps towards equal access to opportunity.
Thank you. I give the floor from joint statement, Harm Reduction International.
Distinguished delegates. The co-signatories of this statement welcomes the reports calling on states to refrain from imposing the death penalty for drug offenses, a stance firmly grounded in international human rights law and standards, which limit this punishment to the most serious crimes. Drug offenses fall outside this threshold. Yet in 2024 alone, at least 615 individuals and likely many more were executed for drug offenses worldwide, marking a dramatic 32% increase over the previous year and accounting for nearly 40% of all confirmed global executions. Iran remains at the epicenter of this crisis, being responsible for 79% of all known drug-related executions in 2024. Most alarmingly, Saudi Arabia recorded a staggering 122 executions, marking a 6,000 increase, signaling a renewed and unforgiving commitment to capital punishment as a tool for drug control. Concerningly, both figures are set to be higher by the end of 2025. This regression is not inevitable. After positive developments in Pakistan and Malaysia in 2023, in June 2025, Vietnam removed the death penalty for certain drug crimes, changes that benefited or can benefit hundreds on death row. But meaningful progress requires international leadership and drug policy reform. We call on member states to continue to publicly condemn this cruel practice, develop coherent alternatives rooted in public health and human rights, and ensure that no funding for drug control efforts risk contributing to executions. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I give the floor to Vivat International.
No microphone, sorry. Center for Human Rights and Peace Advocacy, please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. We draw this Council's urgent attention for the systematic land grabbing and environmental devastation in Sindh, Pakistan, led by the military and its associates under pretexts such as security, development, and corporate farming. These practices have dispossessed indigenous Sindhi peoples, destroyed fragile ecosystem, and eroded civilian authority. In recent years, more than 150,000 acres, including forest, farmland, and protected zone, have been seized or leased to the military-linked entities. Cantonments originally for defense now serve as elite housing schemes, displacing thousands of villagers. The destruction of Khirthar National Park, a UNESCO-recognized sanctuary, and cutting of the mangroves and riparian forest have devastated biodiversity, increased climate vulnerability, and violated Pakistan's international commitment. Communities resisting these violations face harassment, forced disappearance, and criminalization, with women bearing a disproportionate burden. We therefore urge the Council to maintain an independent fact-finding mission, press Pakistan to halt land transfers to military entities, reform colonial-era land laws such as Cantonment Act. This is not only an environmental crisis, it is a humanitarian emergency. We urge the Council to act decisively before, since land, lives, and futures are irreversibly destroyed. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole à Rutgers par vidéo.
Rutgers would like to thank the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights for the update to the technical guidance on the application of a human rights-based approach to the elimination of preventable maternal mortality and morbidity. We specifically welcome the report's attention for legal restrictions that frequently deny women access to the whole array of sexual and reproductive health services, including contraception and safe abortion care. Unsafe abortions are still amongst the leading causes of maternal mortality. Every year, more than 25 million unsafe abortions occur worldwide, causing the deaths of tens of thousands of women and girls. Additionally, many more live with lifelong physical and medical complications from unsafe abortions. This suffering is unacceptable and entirely preventable. It is the result of gender inequality, stigma, and restrictive legal frameworks that fail to provide women and girls with safe and timely care. Criminalizing abortion care does not reduce its incidence. It simply leads to more unsafe abortions. This is why we call upon all member states to prioritize women's health and human rights by ensuring legal access to safe abortion care, allowing them to make their choice without danger, fear, and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to Council for Development by video.
السيد الرئيس نعرب عن بالغ قلقنا.
Thank you very much, President. We would like to express our deep concern related to the violation committed by the Houthi militia in Yemen, undermining economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as political and civil rights. Violations committed by the Houthi that take the form of enforced disappearances, arbitrary arrests, and attacking the freedom of opinion and expression, which represent a violation of the commitments under the International Covenant of Political and Civil Rights. Also, numerous attacks are committed against the rights of women, something that threats all what was accomplished by women in Yemen in terms of equality and combating discrimination. Houthi prevent humanitarian assistance, and this has led to a catastrophic humanitarian situation, undermining the education and health sectors, threatening the future of an entire generation. Such practices threaten peace and stability, not just in Yemen, but in the entire region, and we urge the Council to condemn strongly such practices ensure academically and put an end to impunity. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to the Iranian Thalassemia Society.
تواجه غزة كارثة إنسانية غير مسبوقة أكثر من نصف.
Thank you, President. Gaza is facing a catastrophe, facing numerous difficulties. There's enormous pressure.
الفئات المعرضة للمخاطر.
They are therefore amongst the most vulnerable groups. This is a man-made catastrophe, and in Gaza they are facing a huge humanitarian catastrophe. The hospitals do not have the necessary medical material needed. They also regularly targeted in the context of the deterioration of food security and clean water. This leads to a deprivation of all human rights. And this is especially so for the most vulnerable groups, women, children, and the elderly. Using starvation as a weapon of war runs counter to the Fourth Geneva Convention, and in accordance with the Rome Statute, it is a war crime. Gaza is a moral and legal litmus test. We must work very quickly to stop the humanitarian catastrophe. Starvation must never be used as a weapon.
For underprivileged Iranian patients.
Mr. President, I would like to tell a massacre story confirmed by the World Food Programme. On 20 July 2025, a group of starving Palestinians went to the Kim crossing point, where a 25-truck WFP convoy carried vital food to northern Gaza. The people were hungry, carrying only empty bags to fill with food for their starving families. At first, there were no signs of open fire, but the moment the people reached the trucks, the tanks, helicopters, warships, snipers, and soldiers all began firing at once toward the aid seekers, killing 90 people and injuring 200 others with gunshots in the upper body. 50-year-old Ahmad returned with his brother's dead body instead of food. Zayed, 25, miraculously managed to grab a sack of flour, which was soaked in a man's blood. On July 21st, the Israeli army's Arabic language spokesperson published a post on his Facebook, reading, and I quote, "Gaza residents received the humanitarian aid that entered the Gaza Strip, and not a single shot was fired," end quote. Mr. President, we call on the international community to halt the machine of the genocide, which has been running for 2 years, and bring the perpetrators to justice. Stop the operation of Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has turned the aid centers to death traps. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to International Commission of Jurists.
President, as the High Commissioner warned, Egypt continues to systematically subject real or perceived government critics to prolonged arbitrary detention through the practice of case rotation. The ICJ also deplored the systematic and forced disappearance of detainees, often prior to or during prolonged detentions that are already arbitrary in nature. The authorities' widespread resort to the practice is enabled by the incommunicado detention of purported suspects under counterterrorism legislation for up to 28 days without independent court review. Additionally, despite the authorities' claim during Egypt's 2025 UPR to have established an independent authority to investigate enforced disappearances, they systematically fail to investigate any such complaints. Egypt is among the recipients of the highest number of communication in the 2025 reports of the working groups on arbitrary detention and enforced disappearances. Emblematically, despite special procedures' repeated calls to immediately release him, Egypt continues to arbitrarily detain human rights defenders Ibrahim Metwali. Last week marked the 8-year anniversary of his arrest on spurious terrorism charges as he attempted to travel to Geneva for a working group on enforced disappearances session. 2 years into his detention, he was forcibly disappeared for 20 days and then rotated into additional cases on similar charges. All those detained solely for the legitimate exercise of human rights must be released immediately and unconditionally. I thank you.
Thank you. Franciscans International through video has the floor.
Mr. President, my name is Suraj Nilanga. My son was killed during the 2019 Easter Sunday attack at the Shangri-La Hotel. I demand justice from the Sri Lankan government for my son's death. Nearly a year after President Anwar Dissanayaka's appointment, the government interest in justice is fading. To provide closure for survivors and their families, the truth must be uncovered and the legal process completed. The government has not ensured fair, speedy and adequate reparations for all survivors and victims' families. Ongoing investigations have shown serious deficiencies and the mastermind behind the attack remains unknown. Key issues remain unexplained, such as the non-implementation on protective measures for churches and for guests at the Shangri-La Hotel, which had been ordered in advance. Franciscan International and the Center for Society and Religion urge the Sri Lankan government to facilitate thorough, independent and speedy criminal investigation and prosecutions aimed at ensuring accountability for all responsible. Cooperate with international initiatives to ensure accountability. Provide adequate, just and speedy reparations to all survivors and victims' families after a comprehensive economic, social, and psychological assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Global Institute for Water, Environment and Health by video.
Mr. President, over the past decade, Northeast India has transformed from affected periphery into a region advancing economic, technological, and sustainable development. Supported by the Act East policy, infrastructure investment, and inclusive governance, the region has seen railway commissioning rise by 170%. Air connectivity more than double, and major improvements in roads, waterways, power, and water supply. It is also emerging as a technology hub, with a new semiconductor facility in Assam and raising international investment, including from Japan. On sustainable development, 85% of districts are now SDG frontrunners with advanced in poverty reduction, healthcare, education, gender equality, and clean water. Sikkim's status as the world's first organic state highlight a model of environmentally responsible growth. Northeast India illustrated how investment and partnership can lift marginalized regions while strengthening rights, inclusion, and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Organization for Defending Victims of Violence.
Mr. President, I denounce today with a heavy heart the deliberate starvation of Gaza's civilian population. In the 21st century, children are wasting away before our eyes, their bodies frail from hunger, not by accident of nature, but by design of policy. The UN-backed IPC has formally declared a man-made famine in Gaza, where families are reduced to scraps and parents must watch their children slip into acute malnutrition. Starvation has become a weapon, and its victims are innocent people. Worse still, Israel's sweeping evacuation orders and plans to occupy Gaza, along with proposal to annex over 80% of the occupied West Bank, represent a deliberate campaign toward erasing the Palestinian nation. Starving civilians reveal the destruction of human dignity and a stain in our collective conscience. We call on this council to demand an immediate ceasefire and unfettered humanitarian access to Gaza, to launch an impartial investigation into starvation and forced displacement of civilians, and to commit to mechanisms ensuring accountability, including safe corridors and reporting obligations under IHL. Every hour counts, and delay will only deepen this catastrophe. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to International Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse for a joint statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. INPEA, a founding member of the Global Alliance for the Rights of Older People, aligns with GAROP statements. We applaud the Council's work to advance the rights of older persons. Resolution 58/13 that decided to elaborate a legally binding instrument on the rights of older persons is a victory for human rights for all ages. We also commend the Council's emphasis on civil society participation. We urge member states to include older persons, the representative organizations, and civil society representatives as equal participants alongside states in drafting and negotiating the forthcoming treaty. Nothing about us without us, the principle that guided the inclusion of persons with disabilities in drafting the CRPD led to a stronger, more legitimate outcome and also created an important precedent that we must follow. Only our full and equal participation will result in a convention that is truly responsive to the widespread human rights violations we face in old age, ensuring that older persons in all their diversity age with rights. It is crucial that the UN make adequate and timely resources available to ensure a fully inclusive process. I thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada for a joint statement by video.
Mr. President, Lawyers' Rights Watch Canada, the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute, Lawyers for Lawyers, and the Law Society of England and Wales, with endorsement by the Asian Lawyers Network, are disturbed by China's continued violation against human rights defenders and lawyers. For over a decade, China has systematically subjected hundreds of lawyers to disbarment, vilification, criminalization, unfair trials, and arbitrary detention in China for representing their clients and advocating human rights. Those who succeed in leaving China may be subject to transnational repression in other countries, including forced deportation to China. Numerous lawyers in China have been subjected to incommunicado detention or enforced disappearance while under residential surveillance at a designated location, which is often accompanied by torture and ill treatment. In Hong Kong SAR, human rights lawyers are subject to disbarment or arbitrary detention for publicly upholding human rights and the rule of law. We urge Council members and observer states to consistently call on China for the release of Chinese human rights lawyers and defenders arbitrarily detained or disappeared. Human rights experts have for years been calling for an independent international mechanism to monitor and report on the situation of human rights in China. We urge the Council to heed this call. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Traditional Medicine and Health Developers Society of the Iranians.
Thank you, Mr. President. Israel's so-called complete siege in late 2023 was nothing less than a declaration of war on Gaza civilians. Its leader publicly declared a policy of cutting of essential supplies, food, water, and fuel, a strategy systematically enforced on the ground. People are being deliberately and systematically starved in a campaign of killing through hunger. This atrocity of starvicide must end now. Blocking aid and destroying life-saving efforts is not only a cruel attack on people, but also a clear violation of international law and basic human conscience. Hunger has been turned into a weapon. What began as a long blockade has now become a brutal and unprecedented assault with the clear purpose of breaking people's spirit, destroying their hope, and ultimately taking their lives. The world cannot stand by as civilians face death by starvation. Deliberately starving civilians as a method of warfare is a war crime. The international community must deploy all available means to compel Israel to immediately lift the blockade on Gaza crossing, ensuring full, safe, and unrestricted humanitarian access to prevent the starvation of civilians. Those responsible for these crimes must be held fully accountable. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Institute for Human Rights.
Mr. President, I would like to draw urgent attention to the alarming escalation of political repressions in Azerbaijan. The country is witnessing a systematic dismantling of its independent media, civil society, and democratic institutions. As of June 2025, there are at least 375 political prisoners, the highest numbers in Azerbaijan history. These staggering figures include around 40 journalists and media workers, all of whom have been unjustly prosecuted on fabricated and politically motivated charges. Since February 2025 alone, over 11 new journalists, including 3 freelance journalists, Nurlan Kahramanli, Fatima Movlanli, Ulviya Ali, have been imprisoned in connection with the Maidan TV case. Recently, 7 Abzats media staff, including an investigative journalist with a disability, Hafiz Babali, were sentenced to between 7 and 9 years in prison, despite the absence of credible evidences. Young researchers such as Iqbal Abilov and Bahruz Samadov were sentenced to long prison terms solely for their work on national minority rights and peace-building processes. Political prisoners face torture, ill treatment, denial of healthcare, and inhuman detention conditions, while their families face reprisals such as frozen bank account and constant harassment. We urge this council to demand immediate and unconditional release all political prisoners in Azerbaijan and hold Azerbaijan accountable for its systematical assault on fundamental freedoms. I thank you.
Thank you. Astoir via video.
Speak on behalf of the group Citizen Go regarding the WHO pandemic agreement adopted this year still to enter into force. Far from securing safety, its provisions risk undermining sovereignty, fundamental freedoms, and democratic accountability. The agreement gives the WHO expanded authority to shape international and national responses. This creates the danger that unelected officials not accountable to citizens may influence or override domestic decisions and to curtail freedoms. During COVID-19, we saw how uniform, top-down solutions, lockdowns, mandates, and digital passes were applied. COVID-19 showed that sweeping restrictions on movement, worship, education, and livelihoods can be prolonged and harmful. Equally concerning is its language on so-called infodemics. Vague mandates risk censorship. Entrusting a global body to police information threatens both freedom of expression and public trust. Public trust depends on strong firewalls between decision-making and private funding. Citizen Go has organised dozens of campaigns worldwide, mobilising millions of citizens who reject this drift towards global medical control. Their voices must be heard in Geneva as clearly as in their own capitals. This Council should remain vigilant, and states should not ratify the pandemic treaty as it risks consolidating power at the expense of rights, sovereignty, and human dignity. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I give the floor to Human Rights Research League.
Thank you, Mr. President. More than 4 years after the Taliban seizure of power in Afghanistan, the humanitarian human rights situation in the country remains dire, even further aggravated by the recent earthquake in Kunar province. Hunger is widespread, with more than a third of the population facing acute food insecurity, the situation also exacerbated by mass deportations conducted by Iran and Pakistan, often in violation of the fundamental legal principle of non-refoulement. The exclusion of women from work and public life and of girls from education beyond 6th grade further contributes to this precarious situation and will have a lasting negative effect not only on the mental health of those deprived of opportunities for personal growth, but on the development of the country. Meanwhile, revenge killings in Afghanistan continue to this day. In July 25, for example, a previous commander who had fled to Iran after the Taliban seizure of power returned upon assurances of amnesty, but was shot dead in Faryab province. A popular school principal from Paktika province was charged with the death penalty, allegedly for disrespecting the Quran. And in Ghazni, a religious scholar critical of the ban on education for women was disappeared. Afghanistan evidently urgently needs a watchful eye, and hence we strongly support an extension of Special Rapporteur Bennett's mandate. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Human Rights Now.
Thank you, Mr. President. Human Rights Now protests the United States government's retaliation against statements and actions seeking accountability for crimes committed in the Gaza conflict. In July, the US State Department sanctioned 3 Palestinian rights groups after they petitioned the ICC to investigate alleged Israeli war crimes. On August 9th, the US government sanctioned Special Rapporteur for Occupied Palestinian Territory Francesca Albanese and lobbied for her removal for her statements on Israel's criminal conduct in the conflict. On August 22nd, the US further sanctioned 4 ICC officials, 2 judges and 2 prosecutors for issuing arrest warrants against Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Minister of Defense Yoav Gallant, which the court described as a flagrant attack on the independence of an impartial judicial institution. US Senator Lindsey Graham further threatened to sanction states into economic oblivion if they complied with the warrants, even after US President Donald Trump acknowledged real starvation in Gaza in July, for which the government of Israel bore a lot of responsibility. And despite credible evidence of widespread war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, the US government continues to supply Israel's government with weapons for the conflict. These actions facilitate impunity and support gross human rights violations. And we call on the US government to end all sanctions and harassment of parties seeking accountability in the Gaza conflict, and to end its financial and material support for Israel's military. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Iraqi Development Organization for a joint statement by video.
Mr. President, we draw the Council's attention to the ongoing suppression of fundamental freedoms in Bahrain, particularly the freedom of the press. In the first half of 2025, the Bahrain Press Association recorded 37 violations against writers and online activists. Its mid-year report documented 2,037 violations of freedom of expression, many of which occurred during the Ashura period. An example is the photographer Sayyid Bakr al-Kamil, who was arrested, interrogated, and released only after pledging not to share dissenting content online. Another case is Qasim Muhammad and Hussein Hilal, who were arrested for hanging an Ashura banner. The recently amended press law further entrenches state control. It imposes strict licensing requirements on all media, including digital platforms, enabling the government to censor and control public discourse. The law is used to silence dissent under the pretext of safeguarding the public interest. We urge Bahrain to repeal these regressive laws, respect fundamental freedoms, and bring its legislation into full compliance with its international human rights obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Beijing Wangming Charity Foundation by video.
President, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Tan Hong, a representative of Beijing Guangming Charity Foundation and a film television producer. The title of my speech is Using Culture as a Link to Promote the Dissemination and Implementation of Human Rights Concepts. Promoting and protecting human rights is a common goal of humanity. Civil and political rights lay the foundation by ensuring freedoms such as speech and voting, and individuals to participate in society. Economic, social, and cultural rights offer support by addressing employment, education, healthcare resources, so that people can live in dignity and fulfill their value. Cultural export is an important bridge for spreading human rights concepts through media such as film, literature, arts. The experiences of different countries in human rights and respect are communicated, therefore enhancing international community's understanding of the diversity of human rights. We should create high-quality cultural content, utilize digital platforms to expand communication channels, allow human rights concepts to resonate deeply through culture. Thank you.
The floor to the Cuban United Nations Association for a joint statement.
Mr. President, the multidimensional embargo imposed by the government of the U.S. against the Cuban nation continues to harden and reach extreme levels. This embargo represents the most serious violation of the human rights of the Cuban population, including our civil and political rights, and our people's right to free determination to choose its own system and way of government. We reject Cuba's re-inclusion in the so-called list of states sponsoring terrorism, a unilateral, illegitimate instrument of the U.S. government to strengthen their isolation and suffocation policy. In spite of the ongoing impact of the embargo, Cuba's achievements in human rights are tangible and undeniable, but they are silenced by the ongoing political and media manipulation over Cuban reality. In the promotion and attainment of all human rights for all in Cuba, civil society in Cuba plays an active and growing role. With their own voices and initiatives of various types, we continue to directly participate in designing and implementing public policies in key sectors to economic, social, and political development, and in building and increasing fair, prosperous, and inclusive society. Sir, from Cuban civil society, we also reject the genocide in Gaza and the military aggression attempts of the United States against Venezuela. We must promote peace and solidarity and respectful dialogue between all states. Thank you.
Floor to the Association of Iranian Short-Staged Adults.
Mr. President, this deliberate starvation of Gaza civilians is war crime clearly prohibited by Geneva Convention and Rome Statutes. Since May 2025, over 1,000 Palestinians, including women and children, have been killed by Israeli forces while seeking food, as confirmed by the United Nations. In July 2025, at Zikim crossing, 90 civilians were shot dead and 200 injured merely for carrying empty bags to feed their families. 5 months old Zainab Abu Halib died being less than at birth. Her story mirrors Gaza's collective suffering. Israel's repeated attack on aid convoys, shutting at distribution points, and obstruction of humanitarian access have turned food queues into death traps, while thousands of packages of food and medicine have been destroyed. This is not war, it is systematic genocide. We urge this Council to condemn these crimes, demand unrestricted humanitarian access, and hold perpetrators accountable before the International Criminal Courts. Gaza's children deserve life, not hunger. We further purpose that the Independent International Commission of Inquiry on Occupied Palestinian Territory to be mandated to prepare a dedicated report on starvation as a weapon of war, and that UN-backed units be deployed to ensure safe aid distribution.
Thank you. I give the floor to Edmund Rice International for a joint statement.
Mr. President, as noted by the Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery, Australia is the only liberal democracy in the world that does not have a National Act on Human Rights. Instead, Australia relies on a confusing, haphazard collection of protections scattered across federal and state laws. In 2024, the Australian Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights heard extensive evidence that human rights are not adequately protected, especially for the most vulnerable groups. Migrant workers are among those most exposed. The current legal system leaves large gaps, allowing employers to exploit immigration status and impose illegal working conditions. During the COVID-19 pandemic, migrants died at 3 times the rate of Australian-born people. Migrants in Australia have limited access to housing, education and healthcare due to ongoing racism, visa restrictions and lack of continuing support. For these reasons, ERI calls on Australia to adopt the following recommendations of the Special Rapporteur. Establish a Federal Human Rights Act in line with the recommendations of the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights, proactively monitor the conduct of employers, labour hire companies and migration agents through regular inspections for timely identification of instances of labour exploitation, establish a national registration system for labour hire companies, ensure that all workers are eligible for basic protections, including Medicare, and establish a national compensation scheme for persons who have experienced contemporary forms of slavery. We would like to thank the Special Rapporteur for his report. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Minority Rights Group for a joint statement by video.
The Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is presented to the Council a report on the recognition of Indigenous peoples. We draw urgent attention to the systematic discrimination faced by the Indigenous Jumma people of the Chittagong Hill Tracts in Bangladesh. Since the country's independence, governments has pursued policy aimed at forcibly assimilating indigenous communities into the dominant Bengali Muslim identity. This includes the constitutional imposition of a singular Bengali national identity, denial of indigenous status, and suppression of their languages, cultures, and religious practices. The state continues to prohibit the use of the term Adivasi, denying indigenous people the right to self-identification. The situation is exacerbated by military-backed settlement programs that have displaced indigenous communities. Their lands have been seized for militarization, tourism, and religious infrastructure without free, prior, and informed consent. This land grabbing is accompanied by cultural erasure, including the renaming of villages and places. Alarming reports also indicate coerced religious conversion of indigenous children under the guise of education and welfare. Despite the 1997 CHT Accord promising indigenous autonomy and protection, it remains largely unimplemented. We urge the Council and relevant special rapporteurs to call on Bangladesh to fully implement the CHT Accord, recognize the indigenous status of the Jumma peoples, and cease forced assimilation policies.
Thank you. I give the floor to Family Health Association of Iran for a statement by video.
Mr. President, this NGO expresses its deep concern regarding the 12-day aggression launched by Israel against Iran, which is considered gross violation of the UN Charter, as well as the fundamental principle of IL. This unlawful act of aggression not only endangered international peace and security, but also resulted in widespread violations of IHL. According to the official statistics, this war caused more than 900 deaths and over 4,000 injuries. Among them, 706 were civilians, including women, children, and healthcare personnel. In addition, military staff, medical workers, and soldiers of Evin prison were also among the casualties. This fact illustrated clear breaches of principles of distinction and proportionality under IHL and amount to war crimes under Article 8 of Rome Statute. In this regard, the Association strongly calls for the establishment of an independent fact-finding committee to conduct a comprehensive examination of legal, humanitarian, and human rights dimension of 12-day war. Furthermore, supporting creation of compensation mechanism for victims is the minimum step can be taken to uphold dignity and right of those affected. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à Civicus.
Thank you. Civicus is recognized.
Mr. President, Civicus welcomes the thematic reports of the Secretary General and the High Commissioner.
Recent Civicus Monitor data shows that more than 72% of the world's population lives in countries with repressed or closed civic space. The consequences are reflected in numerous barriers to civil society participation and protection in regional and international organizations, often left without sufficient response from states and the UN system itself. Safe and effective protection and promotion of civic space that is meaningful and inclusive is essential to ensure the protection and promotion of all human rights and to guarantee that the UN human rights system remains relevant and responsive to the situation on the ground. The UN Guidance Note on Protection and Promotion of Civic Space, published in September 2020, reaffirms civic space as a threshold issue for successful implementation of all three pillars of the UN. However, 5 years after its adoption, reporting on the guidance note has not been undertaken yet. Civil societies must be protected and expanded, including by integrating all previous recommendations contained in the guidance note for the UN system to be able to take credible steps in protecting and promoting civic space at the global and country levels. We encourage the Office of the High Commissioner to ensure compliance of the UN guidance note by all UN agencies and offices, including instituting an action taken or status on implementation report, providing information on extent of implementation barriers to full implementation of the note. Establishing full accountability through system-wide dissemination and audits would move it from paper to practice, equipping the UN with further tools to guarantee coordinated responsiveness.
I give the floor to United Towns Agency for North-South Cooperation. Yes, please.
Mr. President, in the name
غير قابل للتصرف وقد شددت قرارات لاحقة منها القرار 152/74 على ضرورة الانتقال من الأقوال إلى الالتزامات.
On behalf of our agency, we have asked to go from words to action. We deal with climate change, and there's lack of security. There is no development without security, and no security without development, which is why we need to have new mechanisms on security and development. There must be a link between the needs of the people and the solutions to those needs. This was something that was mentioned during the Arab-African Dialogue of the Youth. We should have mechanisms for stability to promote justice and peace. We have seen what is happening in Gaza, where human dignity is targeted. Future generations are being deprived of healthcare and education. We will not be able to have development when there is destruction. What's happening is shaking international conscience. Greater efforts are needed to preserve humankind.
Mr. President, as an NGO providing legal services to migrants in the United States, the Advocates for Human Rights welcomes the High Commissioner's report and the opportunity to share our concerns about the erosion of human rights in our nation's approach to migration. With their faces covered, U.S. immigration officials grab migrants from private and public spaces, in front of their children, in houses of worship, in courthouses, and while seeking medical care, without a chance to speak to lawyers or say goodbye to family. Once detained, it is nearly impossible to secure release. Detained migrants face overcrowding, exposure to the elements, abuse, inadequate and rotten food, lack of medical care, and arbitrary transfer. Dehumanizing treatment is a coercive tool designed to increase and expedite deportations, compelling migrants to abandon their asylum claims rather than endure prolonged detention. Yet those who do fight face an eroding legal system with diminished fair trial protections and disregard for refugee law. A recent U.S. tactic to rendition migrants to third countries without guarantees against detention or refoulement repudiates the Refugee and Torture Conventions. We urge the High Commissioner to ensure that the mandate of any independent monitoring mechanism extends beyond border regions because the violation of migrant rights does not stop at the border. We call on all member states to monitor and hold accountable the U.S. and all states collaborating in its violation of migrant rights and to resist any effort to abandon the Refugee Convention. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to International Bar Association for a joint statement by video.
The International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute, Lawyers Watch Canada, and Judges for Judges firmly condemn the position of further sanctions by the United States targeting the International Criminal Court, including the latest designation of the ICC Deputy Prosecutor and other judges. We reiterate that the ICC is a cornerstone of international justice, and these deplorable acts undermine the critical role that the court plays to ensure accountability for the most serious crimes and obstruct the course of justice, jeopardizing victims' rights to remedy and reparation. We further condemn the U.S. sanctions imposed on the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights in the Palestinian occupied territories simply for carrying out her duties. Chair and distinguished delegates, the current U.S. administration is trying to dismantle and abuse international norms and institutions on which survivors of grave abuses and violations rely. Attacks and threats against UN special procedures or against international justice institutions are unacceptable and must stop immediately. We urge this Council to ensure full support and cooperation with international justice institutions, including the ICC, condemn any attacks against its special procedures, and strongly resist to the U.S. attempts to block justice and international accountability for current world's worst crimes. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to INHR for a statement by video.
My name is Sean Wilson, and as someone who has experienced incarceration and the challenges of reentry, I know firsthand the human cost when reintegration fails. INHR, alongside Dream.org, Perseus Strategies, and Reform Alliance, welcomes the OHCHR study and the Council's adoption of Resolution 57-9 in September 2024, the first of its kind to recognize social reintegration as a human rights issue. Reintegration is one of the most pervasive yet overlooked human rights challenges worldwide. As Resolution 57-9 affirms, people released from detention face significant barriers to reclaiming their rights. They are often denied housing, food, healthcare, education, and employment. These systemic barriers, compounded by stigma, are especially devastating for women, children, and minorities. In some countries, rearrest rates are as high as 70%. But there is a path forward. Community-based reintegration programs, especially those that begin at sentencing, reduce recidivism, reunite families, cut government costs, and safeguard rights. When reintegration fails, the harm is multiplied and society bears the cost. We like to thank the member states that contributed to the High Commissioner's study. That is why UN guiding principles on social reintegration are urgently needed to clarify the duties of the state and provide practical, rights-based guidance on what works. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to the Palestinian Return Center by video.
Since October 7th, Israeli settlers have carried out more than 1,700 attacks in the West Bank, killing and injuring hundreds and forcibly displacing over 20 communities, more than 1,200 people, including 600 children. This violence is systematic and state-backed. Most attacks occur under the protection of Israeli forces, while over 90% of Palestinian complaints are closed without charges. At the same time, Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir has issued over 100,000 gun licenses, effectively militarizing settlements. These attacks are part of a broader policy of de facto annexation, creating unbearable conditions to drive Palestinians from their land. A form of forcible transfer and a crime against the humanity. Their intensification alongside the assault on Gaza proves this violence is not response to October 7th, but a long-standing colonial project. We urge this Council to support international investigative mechanisms to address state complicity in settler violence and recognize Israel's failure to protect Palestinians as a breach of its duties as an occupying power, requiring effective international action, including targeted sanctions. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Al-Haq, Law in the Service of Man. Are you ready?
Mr. President, yesterday marked the deadline set by the UN General Assembly Resolution AS/1024 demanding Israel end its illegal presence in the occupied Palestinian territory in accordance with the findings of the International Court of Justice, that Israel's protracted occupation is unlawful, violating the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, and sustained through a regime of facial segregation and apartheid, and must end as rapidly as possible. Rather than abide by the court's advisory opinion and the General Assembly implementing resolution, not to mention the 3 binding orders and provisional measures issued in South Africa versus Israel, Israel has cemented its unlawful presence through unprecedented settlement expansion in the West Bank, while it escalates its genocidal campaign and plans to permanently occupy the Gaza Strip. It is against this backdrop that the Palestinian human rights defenders, including civil society organizations and journalists, are being systematically targeted by Israel and its allies, eliminating Palestinian voices, which historically have been sidelined in any analysis of Palestinians' history, undermines the promotion and protection of fundamental human rights across all sectors and directly facilitates the ongoing Nakba against the Palestinian people. By silencing those advocating for justice, freedom, and dignity, it not only violates civil and political rights, but also erodes economic, social, and cultural rights. These defenders play a critical role in challenging oppression and ensuring accountability, and their persecution sends a dangerous message that the rights of marginalized communities can be disregarded with impunity.
Thank you.
The international
I give
community.
the floor to the China Foundation for Human Rights Development for a statement by video.
Development is inalienable right of all nations, not the exclusive privilege of a few. In the face of diverse difficulties and challenges, all states must reject the supply chain disruption and economic coercion. They must concentrate on the practical cooperations, especially in the digital economic, green development, and supply chain reliance, so as to advance trade, investment, and financial exchanges. Peace and security are prerequisites for the development. Without a stable external environment and international security, development is impossible. Peace, security, and development are mutually conditional, interconnected, and mutually reinforcing, which are always indivisible. In pursuit one's own security expands other interests, we ultimately backfire upon perpetuator. All states must adhere to the dominant direction of peace, security, and development. Strengthen global governments, share development opportunities, and meet global challenges together. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole.
Thank you. I give the floor to Ensemble contre la peine de mort. Thank you. Together Against the Death Penalty welcomes the reports and recommendations presented by the Secretary General and High Commissioner of Human Rights on the question of the death penalty. More than 2/3 of the world's states and territories have now abolished the death penalty. In 2024, a record number of 130 states voted in favor of UN resolution for a moratorium on the use of death penalty. Nevertheless, ECPM is concerned with about the staggering increase in the use of the death penalty in some countries. In the DRC, more than 1,000 people are currently believed to be on death row, following an unprecedented increase in death sentences since 2024. We're horrified by the escalation in Iran, where nearly 1,000 executions have been recorded since the beginning of 2025. The death penalty should never be imposed for crimes that are not considered the most serious crimes under international law, and should never be imposed in proceedings that do not respect the right to fair trial. It should never concern minors or pregnant women. In 2026, we'll be organizing a 9th Global Congress Against the Death Penalty in Paris, sponsored by France with the support of the European Union and Switzerland. Before that, the 5th Regional Congress on the Death Penalty, organized in Tokyo, will take place in November. We invite member states to participate in the World Congress in Paris, and we do hope that it will be marked by ambitious political commitments. Thank you.
Center for Reproductive Rights for a joint statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. In an ever-evolving context, it is important to once again recognize that human rights norms and standards must advance, not regress, to meet current challenges and those to come. Feminist and women's organizations, communities, human rights defenders, victims and survivors, those with direct experience of the issues of hand, have shaped efforts and achievements to advance equality and non-discrimination. Amidst attempts to roll back hard-won progress in gender equality and human rights, they inform, direct and propose new approaches, all of which are vital to hold states accountable, challenge discriminatory power structures, and advance universal human rights for all women in their full diversity. And for years, this work has strengthened and informed the work of special procedures to advance norms and key human rights standards, to advance and protect the human rights of women, girls, and persons with diverse SOGIESC. We welcome and deeply appreciate in this regard the recent statement by Special Procedures, which highlighted that legal and policy frameworks that fail to incorporate a gender perspective risk reinforcing rather than dismantling structural inequality, and that regressive approaches ignore the lived reality of women and girls and obscure the root causes of discrimination and violence. Addressing complex, diverse, and evolving human rights issues is a progressive and collaborative endeavor. We call on all states to make a steadfast commitment to and take tangible actions towards gender equality and the realization of all human rights, ensuring accountability to right holders, and to create a safe and enabling environment which is necessary to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Women's Network for Change.
Thank you, Mr. President. The WNC wishes to raise its deep concern regarding the alarming escalation of executions in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Since August 2024, more than 1,600 people have been executed, with at least 27 executions between September 14th and 16th alone. The number of executions since March 2025 has already surpassed 800. Among those executed were Mehdi Hassani and Behruz Ehsani, whose imminent executions had already been raised in previous sessions. This confirms the systematic use of executions to instill fear and suppress dissent. Of particular concern is the executions of women. In 2025 alone, 35 women have been executed, many of them after unfair trials. When I prepared my text, the number was 34. One more woman was executed in this short time. Mr. President, these violations stand in direct contradiction to the country's binding obligations under the international law, including the right to life and the guarantees of equality and due process under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We therefore call on this Council and its member states to respond with urgency to condemn the surge in executions, to place particular focus on the execution of women, and to ensure accountability for those responsible. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Conscience and Peace Tax International.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Conscientious objectors continue to be imprisoned worldwide for their refusal of military service. Jehovah's Witnesses tell us that their many members imprisoned in Eritrea still include 4 explicitly convicted for refusing military service at dates between 2005 and 2014. That 8 are currently imprisoned as conscientious objectors in Singapore, and 7 on charges regarding refusal of military service in Ukraine, to whom we can add at least 4 other men already convicted for refusal to take up arms after being enlisted by force or deception. Russia, too, refuses to release conscientious objectors from its armed forces. As of last December, 6 were known to be imprisoned for desertion or being absent without leave. Many others, and some from Belarus, have fled in order to seek asylum. As of the end of August, more than 5 young secular Israeli conscientious objectors, men and women, were in prison. Israel also imprisons ultra-Orthodox and Druze objectors and has recently been adding reservists who refuse to fight in Gaza. In Armenia, David Navaratyan remains in prison, and in August this year, Azerbaijan and Turkey returned to the current list by imprisoning Elgiz Ibrahimov and Sina Kochiri-Dogan, respectively. We call on these and all other states to refrain.
I give the floor to the Associazione Comunità Papa Giovanni.
Mr. President, APG23 welcomes the report of the Working Group on the Right to Development. We participated in the 26th session of the Working Group, also on behalf of the Forum of Catholic-inspired NGOs in Geneva, and emphasized the duty to cooperate to create an enabling national and international environment for development, and supported the prompt adoption of the draft covenant on the right to development that was forwarded to the General Assembly in New York. We called for reorienting development finance, reforming international institutions and the financial architecture to ensure a greater voice for developing nations and shaping a fairer debt workout mechanism, global tax rules, and world trade provisions. As Mr. Walk Turk said once, and I quote, "The right to development is especially salient today, both in its broad reach and in terms of the effective solutions that it promotes. The right to development plays a crucial role in building a more peaceful, safer, more just, more generous, and more prosperous world." We welcome all the themes tackled during the 26th session, and especially the debate on the individual and collective dimension of the right to development. In this regard, We would like to reiterate that collective human rights do exist, and there is no point in continuing to deny the collective dimension of the right to development. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Conectas Derechos Humanos. Not here. Union of Arab Jurists.
Thank you. Mr. President, this debate addresses all human rights, civil, political, economic, social, and cultural. But let us ask ourselves, where are these rights when it comes to the people of Palestine? The occupying power's continuous expansion into the Palestinian territory and the apartheid regime it imposes on the Palestinian people further exacerbate the denial of their fundamental rights, including their right to self-determination. The effective promotion of all human rights cannot be dissociated from efforts to combat apartheid and to uphold the right to self-determination for all. As a party to both international covenants, Israel has a duty to respect, protect, and fulfill the rights enunciated in these treaties without discrimination. It includes the rights to life, to an adequate standard of living, to health, to education, and to be free from torture and arbitrary detention. Yet, the occupying power keeps on blatantly disregarding its obligations towards the Palestinians. In the occupied West Bank, they are segregated, forcibly evicted, arrested, and detained arbitrarily. In Gaza, they are under constant military attack, starved and displaced. In violation of humanitarian law, journalists are deliberately targeted for documenting those atrocities. We call for an international accountability mechanism regarding violations of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories. We reiterate our concern over the constant violations of fundamental human rights of the Palestinian people and urge the international community to hold Israel accountable for its breaches of international law. Thank you.
I give the floor to Yotan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Many Tamil refugees are stranded in transit countries such as Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia over many years. Many Tamils fled Sri Lanka to escape persecution that began decades ago. They are survivors of the mass graves found recently, such as Germany in the north, targeted killings that unfolded across 1980 to 2000. While some were fortunate to be alive, many others are not so lucky. Among the buried, are there any Tamil asylum seekers whose cases were rejected and returned to Sri Lanka either voluntarily or involuntarily? We must ask, how many of them now lie buried in unmarked graves? How many were silenced without justice? The fear among the Tamil asylum seekers to return home is not without reason. While governments in Sri Lanka have changed over the past 7 decades, the root cause of the problem have not been addressed. Not a single law has been amended or introduced to guarantee Tamils the right to live in peace with dignity and equal rights. We respect the current government's expressed commitment to reform. However, we also note with regret that serious issues persist. The Prevention of Terrorism Act, land grabbing, arbitrary detention, peaceful protests are often met with intimidation and violence. We urge this council to appoint a country-specific special rapporteur for Sri Lanka, recommend seeking justice for victims of the crimes against humanity and genocide. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Maud for Peace, Development and Human Rights.
Thank you, Mr. President. MAT has serious concern about the increasing challenges faced by many Sudanese refugees fleeing the war in Sudan in registering asylum application due to changes in administrative procedures and difficult economic conditions in Ethiopia and Chad. This has forced many of them to leave these countries and resort on alternative risky routes to reach Europe. Data shows a 134% increase in the number of Sudanese arriving in Europe during the first 5 months of 2025 compared to the same period the previous years. MAD also note that on August 24, 2025, the United Kingdom amended the appeal system in the Asylum Act, which will end the accommodation of asylum seekers in the UK under the fast-track decision by a panel of judges tasked with reviewing the asylum appeal decisions. Finally, MAD recommend that the European countries to call upon to ensure that the migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers are not exposed to the risk of forced deportation. It also called on to the United Kingdom to reappeal the recent amendments to reform the appeal system in Asylum Act. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Asia Pacific Forum on Women, Law and Development. by video.
The Asia Pacific Forum on Women Law and Development makes this statement on behalf of Mongolian civil society organizations that bring the combined voices of diverse groups of older persons, persons with disabilities, and human rights groups. The National Consultative Meeting on the Rights of Older Persons, held on 8th June 2025, came with the united support for the Council's resolution to establish the open-ended intergovernmental working group to draft an international legally binding treaty to protect the rights of older persons. We commend the Human Rights Council for attention to civil society's participation. We believe that the meaningful participation of older persons themselves, of their representative organizations in all their diversity, will bring a new convention that effectively combats the widespread ageism and human rights violations of older persons. We call on member states to ensure full and equal participation of marginalized groups of older persons, particularly older women with disadvantaged backgrounds, older women with disabilities, in the drafting and negotiation process of the new convention. To ensure full inclusiveness, the United Nations should allocate resources that are both sufficient and timely. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Youth Parliament for SDG by video.
President, terrorism threatens inclusive societies not only throughout violence, but also by fostering division. In multicultural contexts, acts by violent frigates are too often projected into entire communities, fueling Islamophobia, discrimination, and exclusion. From London to Paris, Colombo to Mumbai, and most recently Pahalgam, in April 2025, attacks have sought to weaponize identity, selecting victims by faith, provoking retaliation, and undermining social cohesion. Media narratives and secularized policies frequently reinforce stereotypes, casting entire population as suspect, damaging trust and deepening alienation. Such cycle erode rights, mental health, and opportunities to affected communities, while in some cases creating conditions for further radicalization. Balancing security with minority rights and pluralism is therefore essential. States must ensure counterterrorism measures are proportionate and non-discriminatory, promote responsible media coverage, invest in interfaith dialogue, and protect all citizens from hate crimes. Resisting fear and upholding inclusion is the surest way to deny extremists their goal, the fracturing of our shared community. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to International Action for Peace and Sustainable Development is not here. The next one is a video statement by Chatra.
Mr. President, distinguished delegates, during the recent unlawful military aggression against the territory of Iran, it was not only hospitals but also community-based treatment and harm reduction centers, many run by NGOs, that continued their work under fire. Despite the tragic loss of health workers and missiles striking medical facilities, civil society organizations and their staff refused to leave the people behind. Services for those most vulnerable, people in recovery, the homeless, the marginalized groups, were never interrupted. For individuals in recovery from substance abuse, the war brought more than the fear of missiles. It reopened deep psychological wounds, anxiety, fear of survival, and relapse risk. Many faced renewed vulnerability not because care was absent, but because war magnifies human fragility. This resilience is not the achievement of institutions alone, but of dedicated health workers, social workers, and volunteers who stood side by side with their communities. Their courage demonstrates the essential role of NGOs in safeguarding the right to health during conflict. We therefore urge this Council to recognize the accountability for war crimes must include violations of the right to health, particularly mental health, and to guarantee special protection for health facilities, health workers, and NGOs operating in conflict zones. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Human Rights Watch.
Mr. President, Human Rights Watch shares the concern of the independent expert on older persons' rights about age discrimination against older persons in employment. Under international human rights law, states are obligated to justify differential treatment as legitimate, proportionate, necessary. In South Korea, the public and private sector's imposition of mandatory retirement at age 60 or older is exempt from the prohibition of age discrimination and requires no justification. As such, it violates international human rights law and is discriminatory. South Korean law also allows employers to reduce older workers' wages before their mandatory retirement. Data shows average cuts of 30 to 35%, with some cases reaching 50%. These wage cuts are based on the ageist stereotype that older workers are less productive than younger ones. International human rights law considers justification for differential treatment based on stereotypes as discriminatory. In addition, Human Rights Watch found that a mandatory retirement age of 60 or older and reducing older workers' wages cause harm that outweighs any benefits. Less harmful alternative measures are available. States should heed the independent expert recommendation to combat age discrimination and include a requirement for robust justification of any differential treatment based on age in the new treaty on the rights of older persons. Thank you.
Merci, je donne la parole à...
Thank you, Ranka. And the floor for the Association for Sustainable Society.
Continue to perpetuate genocide against Ugandan Tamils, as the case of a massacre occurred against Ugandan Tamils and in north and east of Sri Lanka. The bronze farmer massacre, also known as the 1987 Kokotitole massacre, took place on January 27, 1987 in the village Kokotitole in Patikulur district. At least 83 Tamil civilians were killed. The 1990 Satrukonda massacre was massacre of at least 184 Ugandan Tamils, including infants from 3 villages in the Patikulur district by the Sri Lankan army on September 9, 1990. Although the government instituted to investigation, no one was ever charged. Last August 12th, Tamils gathered at Veeramunai in Ampara district to mark 35 years since at least 232 Tamils were killed by the Sri Lankan military with support of Muslim, part of a series of killing that left hundreds of deaths in just weeks. We urge the international community to refer Sri Lanka to ICC and other tools like genocide recognition and calls for an investigation to genocide, and appoint a country specific special rapporteur for Sri Lanka under Agenda 4 to hold the Sri Lankan perpetrators and the state responsible. These steps are crucial address the root causes of conflict. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd for a joint statement by video.
Mr. President, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, ratified by the UK and Northern Ireland, promises every child the right to safety, stability and the chance to thrive. Yet for thousands of children here, these rights remain out of reach. Homelessness has become a devastating crisis. In just 10 years, the number of households experiencing homelessness has soared by 136%. Today, 19,420 children are officially recognised as homeless. More than 5,300 are in temporary accommodation, while countless others are in unsafe or unstable housing. This insecurity robs children of the foundation they need to grow, disrupting education, damaging health, and eroding their emotional well-being. These figures reveal a system in crisis. By June 2025, 49,129 households were waiting for social housing. Shockingly, over 32,000 of these households have homeless status. Altogether, nearly 62,000 people formally are listed with no permanent home. Behind each number is a person whose right to family life and a decent standard of living is being denied. This is unacceptable. Every child deserves a safe place to call home. Government must act now. The Congregation of Our Lady of Charity of the Good Shepherd and Eben Rice International recommends that the government must focus on homelessness prevention by investing in social housing, ending reliance on temporary solutions, and putting children's rights at the heart of housing policy here. Nothing less will do. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à
Thank you. Reformaf is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. We would like to draw attention of this august body towards denial of human rights in Pakistan and Bangladesh, where religious minorities are facing persistent atrocities without any persecution by state authorities. In Pakistan, the Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa are facing worst military operations since decades. Extrajudicial killing, involuntary disappearance, torture, and other degrading treatments by Pakistan's Punjabi-dominated army are orders of the day. Thousands of Baloch and Pashtun peaceful citizens are missing by the state forces. Often mass graves are discovered. Dead bodies of these missing persons are discovered. Baloch women and children are protesting in different cities to bring their missing persons to court of law, but state forces wage baton charge and arrest these women and children. Dr. Marang Baloch is one of many who have been kept in incommunicado detention. Recently, Pakistan introduced a provisional order giving powers to its security forces to abduct anyone, keep them in state torture cells for 90 days without producing in a court of law. This is violation of United Nations treaties and covenants of which Pakistan is a signatory. We therefore urge this august body to send a fact-finding mission to Pakistan in Balochistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Merci. Je donne la parole à l'Association 3 et Talents de Femmes.
Thank you. And Association.
This is Kaushalya Narendran from Sri Lanka. Today, there has been neither justice nor accountability for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide committed by Sri Lanka 16 years ago against the Tamil Eelam people during their war crimes. There are more than 20 mass graves in Tamil homelands. Among the Chemmani mass in Jaffna, where are over 240 sets of human remains, including the remains of children, infants, and bodies found in overlapping positions. In one of the island's largest ever mass graves, they have been recovered so far, making Chemmani the 17th official record mass grave in Tamil homelands. The High Commissioner, with backing of the Council, in amplifying demands of Tamil victims and the Tamil survey for a justice with no credible domestic mechanism. Successive Sri Lankan governments, including the current one, also have consistently shown zero political will for a meaningful justice and accountability, while Sinhala Buddhist majority derives ongoing abuses. We urge the international community to refer Sri Lanka to the ICC and other tools like the genocide reconciliations and the call for an investigation into the genocides. Without justice, accountability, and the recognition of the Eelam Tamil rights, self-determination, the island criticism will preside. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à APSI.
Thank you, APSI, through video.
Sri Lankan successive government continue to perpetuate genocide against Tamil Eelam, as the case of many massacres occurred against Eelam Tamils in north and east of Sri Lanka. In Tamil Eelam enforced disappeared families, members are waiting for their loved ones, and instead of finding a solution, this council support the militarization of the north and east of Sri Lanka by the perpetrators themselves. In Tamil Eelam, Tamil activists and victims are under Sri Lankan military occupation and are facing continuous harassments under PTA by Sri Lankan security forces and Sri Lankan judicial system. Just for having protested to ask for the basic civil rights, Tamils are losing their lands by systematic colonization, Buddhization, and militarization of Tamil lands. This month, we commemorate Tyagadibam Dileepan, who lost his life, who fasted and sacrificed his life without food and water for 12 days and dead. And 38 years later, Tamil civil society are on the street with same request as was 38 years ago, Tyagadibam Dileepan. To stop the occupation and as the unitary state system in the island denies Tamil nationhood, sovereignty, and the right to self-determination of Eelam Tamils. To stop this occupation of Tamil Eelam, it's vital for the council members to keep talking about Eelam issue with United Nations 3rd and 4th Committee of the United Nations General Assembly, as the international treaties recommended. We, as the core group countries on Sri Lanka, to strengthen this resolution on SLAP and propose a new resolution under item 4.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Luis de la Calle Foundation recommends integrating traditional indigenous cultural methods into the 5th phase of the World Program for Human Rights Education. AINI, the South American culture of reciprocal exchange, treats learning as shared experience through music, fostering intergenerational alliances and cultural preservation. Kirtan, the communal singing and dancing of the Indian Gaudiya tradition, embodies Sama Darshi, equal vision of all beings, and nurtures moral inclusivity. Both practices echo the Greek ideal of eudaimonia, human flourishing, highlighting that true education engages both mind and heart. As Aristotle noted, intellect without empathy is barren. Education must awaken the virtues within each person. We urge the Council to recognize indigenous pedagogies in human rights education, encourage arts-based learning to enhance emotional intelligence and self-expression, support community-based intergenerational initiatives, promote global partnerships and research to integrate cultural perspective. Human rights education offers more than knowledge. It teaches us to live together through shared experience, song, and dance. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. I'll give the floor to IPWR.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les membres du Conseil.
President, Council members, the Institute for the Protection of Women's Rights and the International Association for the Justice Observatory would like to draw the attention of the Council to a very alarming situation regarding serious violations of human rights and the international humanitarian right in Iran. For 2 years of hostility by the occupying Israeli power, targeted civilian facilities, including hospitals, residential areas, as well as support vehicles, were targeted. According to available information, over 1,500 civilians lost their lives, 126 women and 41 children. Essential medical infrastructure was also targeted. 7 hospitals, several emergency rooms, ambulances were destroyed or seriously destroyed. This is a violation of international humanitarian law, as reminded by the Geneva Convention, which calls for strict differentiation between military target and civilian asset. We reject these violations and call the Human Rights Council to react without delay by adopting a strong declaration, quickly creating an international inquiry mechanism that is independent and impartial and trusted when considering the set of obligations and identify those responsible. Thank you. Thank you, the International Committee for Humanitarian Coordination video statement.
Thank you, Chair. We thank the special reporter report on major geopolitical trends and structural drivers of North-South divide. Unfortunately, the special reporter forgets our hundreds millions of people who are facing the unilateral coercive measures, sanctions against nations, and the peoples who are seeking for the right to self-determination by the Western countries. In the case of Tamil Nation, the unilateral coercive measures taken against LTT by Canada, United States, United Kingdom, and European Union destroyed Tamil Nation mood in Tamil Eelam, violate many rights that can be guaranteed under a democratic and equitable international order for Eelam Tamils, and as a result, Tamil genocide was occurred 17 years ago. When it comes to decision making, Tamil Eelam, and we do not take decisions based on unresolved issues where we carry the status of as a state of peoples under international law, especially since we fall under racist regimes such as genocidal Sri Lankan state, where it literally says the Tamil's land is for the settlement of Sinhalese race. Mr. President, we urge the special reporter on international order to publicly condemn the imposition of unilateral measures that undermine the democratic international order in the world, to consider and study UCM against LTTE as political decisions that undermine the international order and discuss the effect of these measures on international stability in his reports and public statements. We ask these council members to have a nomination on special reporter for Sri Lanka, to refer Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court ICC, to recognize Tamil Eelam as non-self-governing territories. Thank you.
Merci. Je passe la parole à
Thank you. CFDH has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. A systematic heritage genocide is being waged by the ministries and the departments of the unitary state in the island of Sri Lanka. The Tamil-speaking people in the north and east are at the receiving end. The UN agencies and the international rights group have reduced their presence in the northeast post-2009. Now, even the development assistance obtained from the international community is used to raise the Tamil identity and transform the historical Tamil heritage places into single Buddhist places. The failure on the part of the UN to investigate Tamil genocide through an independent international investigation is the main reason for the continued genocide. Sinhalese colonizers at settlement in Tamil lands under the guise of development have been prevalent since the independence of the country. They use different methods deployed by successive governments and the military to further disempower of the Eelam Tamil. We urge the OHCHR be explicitly mandate to strengthen and expand OSLAP with clear authority to prepare case files
for international courts, including the ICJ and ICC, if the present draft resolution cannot strengthen the established and IIIM mechanism. We further urge consideration of the expanding OSLAP
Merci. Je donne la
mandate and
parole à
capacity.
l'Association des jeunes.
Thank you. The Association of Youth has a video statement.
Opportunity to make awareness on the use of military and paramilitary on Tamil genocide and ongoing violations against Ulam Tamils in our homeland. Sri Lanka Security Force and its paramilitary made a genocide by killing or enforced disappearance more than 169,000 Tamils in short period of 8 months between October 2008 and May 2009. As stated the successive OHCHR reports, there is no answers, no justice in Tamil Eelam. Families of the disappeared mark 8 years of roadside protest just few weeks ago, demanding to know the fate of their forcibly disappeared loved ones. Many of the families witnessed their relatives being taken into Sri Lanka military custody at the end of the armed conflict, or they were abducted in white vans. Single colonizations and settlements in the Tamil lands under the guise of development have been prevalent since the independence of the country. They use different methods deployed by successive governments and the military to further disempower of Ulam Tamils. We urge the council members to refer Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court to propose a review resolution under the Agenda 2, appoint the country-specific special rapporteur for Sri Lanka under Agenda 4. We also urge the General Assembly to have a similar special session regarding Ukraine and take immediate action against the Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Merci. Je donne la parole à...
Thank you. Support for victims has the video statement.
Les Tamouls de l'Ilam sont confrontés à un génocide structurel.
Thank you. We face a structural genocide from the forces, confiscation of land. Another example is the occupation police in Sri Lanka has increased concern in the population. Now, since the end of the genocidal war, there are many lands under the control of the army and the police. The creation of further forces and now the restitution of the lands to the legitimate people is seen as part of a greater problem of colonization in the region. In spite of several appeals to demilitarization and help from international assistance, Colombo continues to extend the presence of the security forces throughout Tamil lands. A police post was created by the Secretary General of the Police. This new facility is part of the ongoing militarization of the Northeast. Civil society in Tamil and human rights defense organizations have several times called for condemn the construction of military and police-run hotels, resorts, and farms on occupied land, particularly where displaced Tamil families remain unable to reclaim their homes and livelihoods. We ask the council members to nominate the special rapporteur for Sri Lanka, to refer Sri Lanka to the International Criminal Court, and to recognize Tamil Eelam as non-self-governing territory. Thank you. Thank you. That was the last speaker we could accommodate during this session. We will meet again this afternoon at 1500 hours to continue our general debate on item 3 of the agenda and begin the interactive dialogue with the group of independent experts on Belarus. Interactive dialogue with the Special Rapporteur on Burundi, followed by the interactive dialogue with the Inquiry Commission on Ukraine. Thank you again to the interpreters and the technical staff for their availability, and we adjourn the 18th meeting of the 60th session of the Human Rights Council. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.